Welcome to Food, Wine, and Whiskey, a podcast about having fun conversations on tasty dishes, vinos, and spirits from around the world. Rob is your host. He is an avid home chef, WSET Level 2 award in wine, and a whiskey drinker and collector. Time to set the table. Here's Rob.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. Thanks so much for joining. This is going to be a fun episode. As you can see by the title, we are Scotch 101, if you will, entry into Scotch. And I've got two guys joining the show today. Can I call you guys experts? That's not going too far?
No, that's too far.
That's too far?
Yeah.
Okay, well, two guys with just a wealth of knowledge. Fair enough?
We've drank a lot of Scotch.
Some knowledge and a lot of bottles.
Probably drank more Scotch than most people, so wouldn't say expert, but we've drank a lot.
You've explored the spirit, not just drinking, though. You guys have done that deep dive in understanding the spirit from, how it's made. And before we get into all that, let me say who you guys are. We got Todd Grube joining the show. How are you, Todd?
I'm great. Thanks for
You've made a kind of an appearance on the show before when we did the Building a Case of Wine.
Yep.
And Tyler Martin back. You've been on the show quite a few times.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, and it seems like every time you're on, we have a new topic that we're talking about. Whether it's rum or now Scotch or coffee or wine.
I'm a Renaissance man.
Yeah, you are. All right. Well, we're going to dive into the world of Scotch, and I'll tell everybody they know the show is Food, Wine, and Whiskey, and whiskey is kind of this broad kind of category. And I'm going to be the first to tell you that Scotch is something I know very little about. And I'll tell you that, over the years, I've continued to kind of try it because when I first got into bourbon, that whiskey, loved it. And then, obviously you try Scotch and I went, don't love it. And I kind of put it on the back shelf a little bit. And periodically over the last couple of years, I continued to try and, dive into things where people would offer me something and I'd give it a whirl. And I found that I kind of like it now. And I said, you know what, I need to learn a little bit more about this before I need to be educated as I go down this rabbit hole because I figure I'll probably go down this rabbit hole. So.
Do you have anything that you've liked recently that you've tried that you remember?
No, that 22-year-old Kirkland and that 23-year-old Kirkland, that's probably the most recent that I've had, and I thought both of those were delicious.
Speyside Kirkland?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, those are good.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
That's the most recent. I haven't had it enough. I haven't bought because, again, I go, you look at the liquor store, if you go to a big box store, there seems to be a ton of choices in Scotch, and making a good decision on what I might like or not like. Because, that's the other thing I've heard as I've talked to people who are into Scotch. Bourbon is kind of, a one-lane highway. The profile is the profile. It'll have subtle differences, but it's not going to be vastly different. Obviously, you can get some things that might be off profile from a distillery or something, but I've heard Scotch is like, it's got tentacles going everywhere.
Well, just inherently, you think about all of the bourbon that's made in America. Take out the craft producers. You're talking about 10, 12, 15 distilleries.
Yeah.
It's 150 in all of Scotland. A tiny little island. There's 150 of them. And they're still very, very, even in a small area, they're all very different. So there's just inherently a broader range of selections. They're not as, I don't know if hamstrung is the right word, but they have a lot more options of what they can do, whether they're going to make something that's peated, non-peated, using wine barrels, ex-bourbon barrels, whatever it may be. There's just inherently more options and more room for creativity than there is maybe in some other
Which is interesting
categories.
Because legally for Scotch, it can only be made with 3 ingredients. So despite that, they can go in so many different directions for the variety. It's just the barley, the yeast, and water.
So we're talking about just the distilling process.
Yeah.
And then once we get into what we call in the bourbon world, finishing something. Okay. Well, let's do this. I do want to say that, you're going to hear a lot of comparison to bourbon. That's kind of what I know. And I think as people listen to this show, that's what a lot of people, we talk about most frequently as bourbon, as that whiskey. Is there another whiskey? When Irish is, one that I would think of, but Irish bourbon, Scotch, are there whiskeys I'm missing, that are drunk from around the world?
Those are the 3 biggest.
Okay.
And I would say almost everything else is a derivative of those. Like Japanese whiskey is meant to be a Scotch style whiskey. So, and most American whiskeys are either going to be more like Irish or Scotch. When I must say like single malt, American single malts.
Yeah, which is it's a growing category.
Yeah.
All the big brands in bourbon are starting to make single malts. I just saw Bullet at Specs.
Oh, really?
Not on the shelf. I saw it hiding, but I know it's out there. But that's Scotch. It's built off of the blueprint of Scotch.
Okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't, skipping something that maybe should be mentioned or something. I don't think of anything else, but
I mean, there's other countries that make
Like Cavalon, I mean, but that's still a single malt. Like,
well, like Australia makes some really, really good ones, but they're Scotch.
Okay.
They're trying to emulate. They're trying to make their own thing, but it's malted barley. It's a derivative of Scotch.
okay. Well, let's start here. Obviously, Scotland. I think everybody geographically, we don't need to tell them where that's at. Part of the United Kingdom, they should have an idea. But what is Scotch? What makes it Scotch? And kind of what are the rules for Scotch?
so like I said, it starts with 3 ingredients. It's the malted barley, the water, and the yeast. For the distillation, it cannot be distilled higher than 94.8% alcohol, which is similar to bourbon, which is some 80, I think, 80%. Is it 160 proof? It can't be higher.
Right.
So Scotch lets you distill a little bit higher.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is, and it's also pot still. So I think maybe that's why they let it go higher, because pot still tends to be just packed with flavor compared to like a column still. So you can distill it a little higher, and you're not losing all that flavor. But also that's the maximum. So I think most of them are not going to go there.
Sure.
It must be aged in casks, oak casks in Scotland for at least 3 years, and it must be aged immediately after distillation.
Okay.
And then it has to be bottled at least 40% alcohol. Does that cover it? Cover it pretty much?
Yeah, and just to jump in, what Todd's describing is the single malt. There's also single grain, which is a little bit different set of rules. You can use, there's a couple of other grains you can use, like corn. You can still use barley. Those can run through a column still. They don't have to go through pot still. They can do either one. And they can even be a blend of those grains. It's still single grain if it's from one distillery.
Okay.
And then you've got blended malts or blended grain whiskeys, which is multiple distilleries blended together. But when you say Scotch, people inherently think of single malt. That's the largest category, at least when people are thinking about it. It may not be the most consumed, but that's what everybody associates with it.
And I think it's also associated with higher quality. Would you say that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some really, really good single grain whiskeys, and you can find some really high end ones. But on average, single malt is the top of the pyramid, if you will.
And like Tyler said, any of the things that I mentioned that make it Scotch, if you deviate from that, like if you're using other grains, or even if you don't use a pot still, like I've had a 49-year-old single grain that was phenomenal because it's Scotch, except it was on a column still. It was made on a column still, basically. That's the only difference.
That's from Scotland.
Yeah, everything else meets all the requirements, except it was not on a pot still.
That was one of the questions I had. I'm guessing then, if you're doing a single malt, it's always going to be a pot still.
Yes.
And if you're doing a single grain, you might use a column still.
Yeah, it's just more efficient.
Or you might use other grains. Or you might use malted barley with another grain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we were to talk to, and again, we're going to keep going back to the bourbon drinker, for how's it different? I mean, we kind of get some understanding because we're talking about, the grains that are used, the barley that's used and things like that. But let's go here first. Misconceptions, because I think a lot of people in bourbon, the first thing they do when they try a Scotch is they might have one that's peated and their thought is that's Scotch. That's all it is. And so push it away. I don't want any more of that. Not true.
Right.
Okay.
Actually,
big misconception.
The very slim minority of Scotch is peated.
Okay. I did not know
most
that.
Scotch produced is not peated.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
But I think also, and that, I totally agree, that's number one, is that they think it's going to be peated or that it's going to be smoky. And I would say that there is kind of a bit of a more smokiness with Scotch. I think that just comes from the barley compared to with bourbon. Corn is the base, so it's going to be a little sweeter. Scotch just tends to be a little bit more grainy, which can, I would say, earthy rather than smoky. And so people, and I think the psychology is part of it as well, because they think peated and they taste the Scotch that's not peated. Because I've had friends before taste it and they'd say, I just don't like the peat. And I'm like, there's no peat in this.
Right.
It's just a different flavor profile.
Yeah. Now, all Scotch, because all Scotch is, single malt is all malted barley. part of the process, and the reason for peat is to stop it from malting or germinating. You heat it up. And
Well, let's talk about what peat is. Where does it come from? It's not something I think people hear peated and they just go peated. They don't actually know what it is or what the process or why it's being used.
probably thinking about the stuff they put in their flower bed, and that is what it is.
Yeah.
So when you germinate or malt barley and it starts to sprout, you have to stop that somehow. And the way that they would do that is to pump smoke and heat through the malting floor, and that would stop it. There's not a lot of trees in Scotland, so they realized, well, we can go out, we can cut 5-6 feet down into the ground, and there's these peat bogs. It's just essentially stuff over the years that has decayed, but you can burn it. It creates a lot more smoke than something like wood or anthracite, natural gas, whatever. There are certain parts of Scotland that's traditionally how they would do it. There's other parts, especially in the Highlands, where there are coal and anthracite reserves. They would use that. So even if something is not quote unquote peated, it's still using some sort of heat to stop germination. So that's, like Todd said, there's still some level of kind of smoky roastiness that you're just going to get because that's how you make it.
Okay.
But I agree that's the biggest misconception in Scotch for sure is that it's all smoky.
Is there any other misconceptions we should?
I think the other one is that it's your grandpa's drink. It's real stuffy. It's all the same. There is so much variation in Scotch. My wife says that bourbon's like a hallway, Scotch is like an atrium. You just open up into this huge room of options, and that's not to take anything away from bourbon. It's just meant to be a very specific thing. Scotch allows a lot more variation, and just inherently with 150 whatever distilleries, there's going to be a lot more variation.
Yeah, and I think people get stuck with tasting what they've tasted and they give up. But there's so much variety. If it's not completely repulsive, I think they need to go back and try again.
Yeah. One of the things I would think is a misconception from bourbon drinkers, once guys are into bourbon and maybe looking to kind of venture into Scotch, is they may look at a bottle and go, multiple bottles and go, well, it's 86, it's 80, it's 92. Can't be that good if it's that low a proof. In bourbon, it's always about, is it 120 or higher? That's where you get your flavor.
Yeah, you don't see that in Scotch drinkers, I don't think. If you do, they're probably bourbon drinkers that have gotten into Scotch. But you'll actually see a lot of Scottish people add water to their whiskey. Even if it's a lower proof Scotch, they will still add water. There's a guy that has a really famous YouTube channel named Ralphie. He will add water to almost everything. Even if it's 85 proof, he's going to add some water to it. So I don't think there's this conception that if it's not 100, 110, 120 proof, it doesn't have flavor. It's got tons of flavor, even at low proof. So I don't think there's that level of, I don't know if snobbery is the right word, but, being the proof whores that you see people being with things like bourbon.
If you come from bourbon and you're at the stage in your bourbon journey where you like the high proof, then Scotch, I think maybe it might not be the time for you to get into the lower proof Scotch. Because I think a lot of people at whiskey's journey in general, especially bourbon, it starts low, right? People can't handle the high proof, and so they're drinking on the rocks, they're adding a lot of water. They can't really go above even 100 proof, let's say. Within a year or two, they're looking for above 120, and that's the only thing they want. And then they don't want to drink that like 90 proof Eagle Rare. But then if they continue, I think that they tend to come back. And that's what I've done, because I was the same. I just wanted the high proof stuff. But now I really enjoy 90 proof bourbon. 90 to 100 is a great spot.
Another thing I think to mention, to get most bourbons down to 80, 86 proof, whatever, you do have to add a good bit of water, because normally it's coming out of the barrel much higher proof than Scotch. A lot of these are lower because they're coming out of the barrel at maybe 90 proof, so they may not be adding much water at all.
Well,
but it's a much cooler, much more humid climate, so the alcohol's going out instead of coming in.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to mention. Just where these, when we talk about bourbon and Scotch being made in what that climate, that typically that type of weather is in Scotland. And then, another thing with bourbon I think about is it's always got to be new charred barrels, American oak.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think it has to be American. It's just got to be new oak, right?
What? Bourbon?
Does it have to be American oak? Okay. But in Scotch, it's not. I don't think it's ever new charred. It's always something used. Can it be new charred?
It can be. I don't know that
But
anyone would
typically
pay
not.
for it.
Okay. And then the time, when we think about bourbon, you're going, a good bourbon might be 6 to 9 years. That might be what we call the sweet spot. And then in Scotch, it's going to be quite, I'm thinking,
That
quite a bit
shows
more than
the
that.
difference in the temperature again, because in Scotland it's much cooler. So, you know, I know that the people listening can't see the table, but I have a 16-year-old Scotch here. Now this is just aged in an oak cask, so there's no finishing, and like when you add sherry, it's going to get that dark, like deep amber color. And this one is kind of like hay. It's very light yellow color, and it's 16 years old. Bourbon, 16 years old, is going to be
Syrupy.
really heavy.
Compare that to this. I'm holding up a bottle of Tamdu 10. So it's 6 years. I mean, almost half the age of that Kilkerran, but it's aged in sherry.
Okay.
And now that one,
29 in sherry,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, black.
Yeah. Big difference. So that, and I bring that up because that's part of the process when we talk about flavor. You know, I think to some extent you could be fair to say in bourbon, because it gets so hot and you evaporate so much water, you do get a lot of flavor at a higher proof. And to your point, depending on barrel entry and everything, you may have to add more water, which obviously dilutes it down. Scotch, you don't have to deal with that. So something going 10, 12, 18, 24, 30 years, it's not losing, and so it's going to have.
I mean,
all
I've
this
even
flavor.
heard stories of distilleries that have to blend barrels with younger barrels because they've dropped below 80. They could not bottle a barrel at its barrel strength because it was below 80 and it was no longer Scotch legally.
Really?
So they'd have to blend a 29-year barrel with a 27-year barrel to get it, and it has to be labeled 27, of course. But they had to get the proof back up.
Okay. Anything else on that?
I think just speaking on age, another misconception is that Scotch is too expensive. Now, of course, it depends on what your price point is. It does have a higher entry point, I would say, for the decent stuff compared to bourbon, which you can still get decent bottles for $30, $40. And in Scotch, I don't know that that's the case. You probably want to be at around
60?
60, 70, up to 100 is kind of the entry level.
Below that, there are some blended scotches that there's a little bit of snootery, I think, against blended scotches, but that's what the average Scottish person is drinking more blended whiskey than they are.
Like Johnny
single malt.
Walker.
Like Johnny Walker.
That's the most well-known blended Scotch, and it's very nice. Like Johnny
Yeah.
Walker Blue, it's nice, but it's
That's an American producer. Is it or no?
No.
What Johnny Walker? That's
Scotch.
from Scotch. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
I don't know why I always associated that it was some distillery here who owned that.
Yeah, but there are some, especially brands that historically are blended. I'm thinking of things like Ballantine's Finest, or there's one called Isle of Skye, which is made mostly with Talisker because that's the only distillery on the Isle of Skye. Those you can get more in the 30 to 40 price range, and they're very good. But I think people will see those and get turned off almost because it's not at least $70, and they think, well, that can't be good. But actually, those can be quite good.
Okay. The other thing I have no understanding. You know, before we started recording, you were showing me some things, and it's a little bit confusing. I think in the wine world, it's kind of similar. You got to learn regions where things are from. When I think about bourbon, you go, is it made in Kentucky or is it made somewhere else? And you know, I don't really put a lot of weight in somewhere else. There's some other places that make good bourbon, but when you think Kentucky, you think, okay, it's probably going to be pretty good juice.
And it's a valid comparison because even in bourbon, Tennessee whiskey is going to generally have a different flavor. If you know that something is distilled in Washington State or Colorado, it's going to taste different than Kentucky.
Texas.
Yeah, Texas, yeah. The heat.
So is it important to know the regions of Scotch? You know, because how many are there? What are they?
It is, but at the same time, it's important to know what the distillery is going for, because you will have some. I mean, there are true generalities. We were talking before we started. Lowland whiskeys, so the very south part of Scotland, generally going to be lighter in body, lighter in color, more approachable, softer. That being said, we've got one on the table that's aged in sherry, peated, so it's much, much more flavorful. So there's exceptions. Or we've got one on the table from Islay that is not peated. So you may try that blind and think it's from the Speyside region, which is associated with more thick, viscous sherry aged. So there are generalities, and it's important to know. But at the same time, there are plenty of exceptions, and it depends on the distillery. But we can talk about the region. So the first lowlands, first one I mentioned. So the south part, generally, I don't know what the actual official geographic line is, but I think of anything below Glasgow and Edinburgh down to the English border, that's the lowlands. It's also the most sparsely, the most sparse area of whiskey production. There's only a handful of distilleries there.
And it's a pretty big area.
It's a pretty big area. So lowlands, really large area, not a ton of distilleries there. Then kind of one of the next kind of well-known ones is Islay. It's Islay, pronounced Islay. It's an island off the west coast, a tiny little island. I don't know the number of distilleries there. I think it's probably around 10, 12 just on that one little island. They certainly have their style. It's generally going to be more peated, and especially this kind of like iodine medicinal quality. You find that a lot in Islay, but again, there are some exceptions to that. Then going up kind of to the northeast, you've got the Speyside region, which is along the Spey River Valley, kind of to the, if you're looking at a map, it's a little bit to the east of Inverness. Generally, those are going to be aged in or maybe finished in sherry. That's kind of what they're most associated with. Speyside is a enclave within the greater Highland region. Basically, Highland is everything that's not something else. Once you get north of about Edinburgh, you're kind of in the Highlands territory. So you'll see some things that are maybe labeled with, the Isle of Skye, the Isle of Mull. So they may not say Highland on them, but sometimes you will also see things from those places that are Highland. So,
and it's known as the most diverse region just because of the size.
It's kind
of
the catch-all,
yeah.
right?
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's one more, and it's actually just a town called Campbelltown that very historic. There used to be a large number of distilleries there. I think there's now 2, but it has its own kind of special quality to it that it's generally going to be peated, but there's a lot that aren't. Really, Springbank is one of the big ones there. Kilkerran is there. Some really good ones there as well. I think that's it. Did I hit them all?
I think you did. Yeah.
I think that's it.
Well, yeah, you did.
Okay, so when the consumer goes and he or she are going to shop at a place looking for Scotch, is there 1 or 2 regions that they're going to see on a bottle that are thought to be the most popular, or you're pretty safe to get something from here as far as quality?
Speyside is the one.
Speyside is the one.
Highland is the one you'll probably see the most, but it's like Todd said, there's so much variation. You don't really know what you're getting unless you know the distillery.
Okay.
Most of the biggest brands are
Speyside-
between the two. Highland and Speyside, most of the brands that your common person would know are going to fall within those.
Yeah. Speyside is, you talk about the mega distilleries, the Glenfiddichs, the Glenlivets, Macallans, those are in Speyside, Balvenie. The really, really big ones that people know are right there together, and they're all within about 5 square miles of each other.
So do any of these regions, let's just say with Speyside being what we think of as pretty good, when we think about wine, you go into a region like Burgundy and you might go, okay, we know here, and here it's going to be really good, but it's going to be really expensive. It's fun to find, like the Chalonnais, that it's going to have some bang for your buck. It's a little under the radar. People aren't buying it, so you can still get great product for not a crazy amount of money. Are there little hidden gems that you guys find that you like, or is it just kind of when I think about bourbon, I go, stick with the big producers. They're going to make quality stuff at a good price, and it's not like you're going to a micro distillery that's going to be $100 for 4-year-old bourbon.
Well, I'll put it back to you in a question. There's a reason why maybe something that Chalonnais is a lot cheaper than maybe like a Pouligny. Why is that?
Because of demand and marketing, and it's got this following behind it, and it's just got the history.
Right, and it's where the fruit comes from.
Sure.
Because that plot has been decided produces better fruit for making wine. That's not the case in Scotch, because the barley doesn't even have to come from Scotland. So where the distillery is actually located is far less important than where a vineyard may be. So it's not like, oh, here's this little valley that's a hidden gem because nobody thinks of it. It's since the barley can really kind of come from wherever, it's more about style and approach that they're going for.
And there is some influence, but like Islay especially. I mean, they say that like it's, you have the ocean air, and so that permeates the casks, and you might get a little bit of that briny into the Scotch. Same for Campbelltown, because it's kind of like a little peninsula above Islay, right? It's like kind of in that area on the West Coast.
Yeah,
and
but
so
I just say
picks
that
up
like
some funk.
within Speyside, you're not going to find a small enclave within that's a better value because of where it's located.
Okay.
In the way that you would with wine. Maybe.
The brands may say that it is, but that's the question: does it matter?
And I gave the example of wine because I think you can still find what is classified as Premier Cru or Grand Cru, and it's really good. It's just people,
right,
for whatever reason, haven't bought it or aren't buying it.
Now,
but I think that's going to change.
I think that is true, and I use this example we were talking earlier. Let's compare Macallan 18 and Glendronach 18. Macallan is Speyside, arguably the biggest name in Scotch. Really, really good. Glendronach, it's become much more popular in the last 10 or so years, but it shut down for 5 years because nobody was buying it. Basically, all of their product was going into blends.
Really?
And I'll just mention that real quick. A lot of these distilleries, not a lot, there are a number of Scotch distilleries that you will almost never see their name on a bottle because it all gets sold to a blending house, to somebody like Johnny Walker.
Okay.
That's buying from different distilleries and blending it together. So there are some that it's kind of rare to find those. Lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
Can you pause for a second?
Yeah, so you've got the Macallan, you've got the Glendronach that, like I said, for a while was so little known that it shut down. They both make an 18-year-old product. They're both great. I love both of them. I may catch some flack for this. I prefer the Glendronach 18 to the Macallan.
Oh, I do too.
Okay,
I think
I'm not
to me,
alone
it's
in this.
the
Macallan's
best 18-year-olds.
relatively boring.
Also,
there's nothing wrong with it.
Talk about price.
That's what I was
Macallan
getting to.
is the premium brand, I would say.
Yes,
right?
and it's $400, maybe a little less for a bottle of their 18.
Yeah.
The Glendronach 18, you can find it for $220, $230.
And that went up for the longest time.
It was $170.
A popular question in Scotch is, I'm buying a gift bottle. My budget's $200. $200 seems to be the
Glendronach
budget.
18.
Yeah, that's easy sell
Every time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Easy
Okay.
sell.
So the question for me would be, is it better in your opinion just based on the product itself without the influence of saving that money in price? Or is it the difference in how much better the Macallan 18 is doesn't offset the difference in cost? Or do you just really like it? Because
Price aside, I prefer Glendronach.
you do?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that
Yeah, me too.
says a lot then. Because there's some drinks or something I might have, wine or spirits, that I go, yeah, this is a little better, but not $100 better, not $150 better.
Yeah, and I want to be careful not to disparage Macallan because it is really well made. It's really, really good. They have spent a lot of time and money putting their name out there. There's a reason why everyone knows that name. There's a reason why everyone knows Glenlivet and Glenfiddich, these big ones. They spend a lot of money on marketing, and that's why their products can be more expensive, as opposed to there are probably quite a number of bottles on the table that, unless you're a Scotch drinker, you've never heard of it. But I would wager to say a lot of people have heard of Macallan, even if they're not Scotch drinkers. It's that big of a name.
It's one of the bottles that's on every bar.
Literally every bar.
If you're at a bar in a hotel and they have 5 bottles of Scotch, Macallan's going to be one of them.
Probably Glenlivet's going to be one of them.
Okay, so
Glenfiddich, maybe.
Yeah. Essentially the big boys.
when we, again, back to bourbon, when I see people taste bourbon, drink it blind, they're trying to specifically get to the producer. Whose bourbon is this? In Scotch, is it same thing or is it a region? Because it's kind of,
It's
when
so
you think
much harder because, especially if you talk about Kentucky bourbon, there's 8 distilleries. You've got a 1 in 8 chance of guessing right. You pour a random Scotch, unless it's just, there are a couple like Edward Hour is one for me that I can generally pick it out of a lineup because there's something in their spirit that it's just always
And their
there.
finishing is heavy.
They're heavy finishing.
Heavy
It's
sherry.
got a really earthy quality that I can almost always pick out. Other than that, I'm probably not going to pick out as much Scotch as I drink. I'm probably not going to guess stuff blind very
I think
well.
regional space sides are easier to pick, I think, because they tend to have that fruity character and just nicely balanced.
That being
Isla,
said,
easy. That's going to be an easy one.
But like that Buna that I brought,
Yeah.
a lot of people would pick that as a space side.
Yeah, and I think that's because of the finishing. It gets
Yeah.
back. This is a sherry finish Scotch that we're going to drink, I think. And a lot of Speyside likes to age in sherry. So once you add that sherry, you lose a little bit of the quality of the Scotch. And that's another argument in Scotch is well, do you want to taste the character of the Scotch or is it all the sherry that you're tasting?
okay.
Because you lose a little bit of it, but for a lot of these brands, that's their identity. It's the two together.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it confuses things when you're talking about regions, especially like Highlands. Like we said, it's pretty diverse. So Highlands would be the toughest to pick, I would say, just because it could be so many different styles.
I would say there are maybe some Highland distilleries that I would be, the only way I would guess it's Highland is if I knew that, if I was like, oh, I've had that before, I know what that is. Otherwise, it's
crapshoot.
I think Campbelltown can be picked out, but I think it gets back to your question: is that regional is what we can guess. If we're going to guess, it could be maybe the region.
Okay.
But actually guessing brands, you'd have to be familiar with that brand.
Okay.
But rarely am I drinking a Scotch and trying to figure out what it is.
Just appreciating what's in the glass.
I kind of like that it's so hard to pick out what it is, because you're right. You sit down with a glass of bourbon, everybody's like, well, is it Jim Beam?
Yeah.
Where is it from? Almost nobody, I feel like, approaches Scotch that way, and I think it's
because of
nice.
the sourcing in bourbon. Because there's so much sourcing, all those big brands source, and so you never know what you're getting. And in Scotch, if it says the name on it, if it's a single malt, it's almost 100% made by that producer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing you guys say, finished Scotch. And we know in the bourbon world, if it's finished, it's no longer bourbon. Scotch, that doesn't apply. It can be finished and it still can be categorized as Scotch.
It's worth mentioning too, we've kind of borrowed that term from bourbon, but a lot of these Scotches are actually fully matured in sherry or port or whatever.
Okay.
There are some, like Balvenie has one called the Double Wood. It's not this one that we have on the table, but it starts its life in just used bourbon barrels. Most Scotch will be aged in used bourbon barrels because they are plentiful, they're cheap. You can only use a bourbon barrel once for bourbon, and they've got to go somewhere. Most of those go to Scotland. Then they may put it in a sherry cask, but there are a lot. For example, this Tamdu, 100% sherry aged. So there's also not this stigma around aging or finishing that there is in maybe bourbon and even rum to an extent. There's no one really has an issue with what it's aged in. Is it good or not?
Okay. How much does age does age matter, and should it matter? Because you see, we talked about this. I feel like the entry level for a Scotch anymore. Well, let me say this: when I was growing up, I'll date myself a lot. Used to love watching MASH, and I'd always remember Winchester talking about getting a 12-year-old Scotch sent from home, and this was this great whiskey that he's going to have. But it seems to me, as I've kind of got into Scotch just a little bit of trying to understand it, seems like 12 is an entry level Scotch.
I think that's the marketing number. Those are the bottles again when we talk about the standard bottles that are on a bar, it's that 12 year.
Okay.
And I think because the price point, I don't even know what's the price point on a lot of those 12 years now. Under 100?
Yeah, most of them I would guess
like 80,
will be below
$80.
70, 80, 90, something like that, depending on the producer.
And so that's just because that's what's popular. It's a popular price point, and those brands are the ones that have gotten themselves on the shelves. But I would say with Scotch, me personally, I do like the age because it kind of takes the edge off of, just like with bourbon, if you have a younger whiskey, it has that edge.
Little bite.
Yeah. And with Scotch, it's going to kind of mellow that out. But I have some 8-year Scotch that I really enjoy, but again, it's going to be a little bit heavier, and it's going to have that youth to it. 12 is a good number.
I didn't even know they do an 8-year. What's the youngest Scotch that you might see? We may not see it here, but in Scotland, what might you see?
Well, it has to be 3 years old
to
be considered Scotch in the cask. But in Scotland, I actually don't know the answer to that. You just don't see a lot. Like I said, and the reason for this is because the big brands put out their 12-year product, and that's just become the number.
Yeah, okay.
For Scotch. But there are a lot of 10-year products out there that are very good. You just might not see them on a shelf necessarily, unless the bar has a better selection.
The lowest core offering that I know of, and I guess you could call it core offering, at least distillery produced bottling. Ardbeg has one called Wee Beastie that's 5 years old. But that's very uncommon. Other than that, there's a couple that might be 8. 10 is kind of the first normal age. 12 is by far the most common. You rarely see 13 and 14. 15 is the next big one. You may see 16 and 17 some, but 18 is much more common. 21, 25, 24, 25, 30.
It's
and
funny
then
how that is 12, 15, 18, 21, 25, 30.
Yeah. And it's all marketing.
40
Someone
from there.
And a lot of it is probably that there was a producer that made a really good product, aged that old, and that's just what it was. And people associated that with quality. I don't know what the story is. I would guess it's probably something like Glenlivet had a 12-year that became known as quality, and people associated that. There are distilleries actually that Glenlivet was so popular, they would stick Glenlivet on the end of their distillery name just to try to get that notoriety. And it wasn't until, I forget how long ago it was, but the distillery actually sued these other ones to make them stop. Benriach is an example of one. I have a bottle at home that is labeled Benriach Glenlivet. It's right down the road from it, but they are in no way associated. It's just Glenlivet was a name of quality. I have a feeling 12 was just someone had a 12-year-old whiskey that became really popular, and so everybody else followed suit and said, well, if Macallan or Glenlivet's making a 12 that's popular, I'm going to slap that on my label too.
It's just like, keep comparing it to bourbon, like Wild Turkey 101, and then Eagle Rare came out with 101. And they were competing with them.
Okay.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question: when you shop, is there I used to hear people in Scotch say, $10 for every year of age on that Scotch. Is there some kind of guideline that you should be within a kind of a window? If I'm looking at 5 producers that are all 12-year or 15-year, should they be similar in price, or are there reasons that you talked about the Macallan 18 versus the other and almost double in price? Is that something that
They should be around about the same, but there's always going to be exceptions to that, especially, and this is maybe a good time to start talking about independent bottlers, because it's very common in Scotch that it's a little bit looked down on, I think, in bourbon. And what I mean is people buying product from a distillery and labeling it under their label. Now, the difference is normally in Scotch, you'll have the name of the independent bottler. Gordon and MacPhail is a big one. But they'll usually state the name of the distillery on there very clearly. Sometimes they're not allowed to do that. The distillery may make them sign something that says you can't do that. So they will just call it a 12-year-old Speyside. A lot of times they'll give clues like in the label that kind of tell you what it is, but they don't say the name of it. For example, there's one I'm thinking of, I forget who it is, but the label, in the label, there is a silhouette of a distillery, and it's very, very clearly the distillery they bought it from.
Gordon and MacPhail likes to do Speyside parentheses M close parentheses, which means Macallan.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But you can imagine if you're Macallan, you don't want somebody selling an 18-year-old under their label for $260 and them going, wait, that's as good as the Macallan 18 that I'm paying $400 for. Why in the hell am I buying that?
Yeah.
So they have to kind of protect their product a little bit. But I'm trying to think, like Signatory is a really, really popular one. I don't know in what way they're involved with Specs. Maybe they're not. I just know Specs imports a lot of Signatory bottlings. But that one that I'm looking at very clearly says the name of the producer. Those may be the only 2 independent bottlings we have, actually, which is kind of unusual because normally I've got quite a few of them. But it's not looked down on the same way that it is in bourbon, where it's like, oh, well, they didn't make it themselves.
Yeah, it's more that they're featuring single barrels most of the time. That's what they're doing, is they're just saying, hey, we got this great cask. And to answer your question about the pricing and how it differs, it's really brand based rather than quality based. Because going back to Macallan, I have a 19-year Macallan from Gordon MacPhail. I think I paid $200 for it. That Specs has a 19-year-old Macallan branded single barrel, and I want to say it's $1,000.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you take that name off of it, so that's, to the quality question, it's the same stuff. Maybe the Macallan one was a special barrel that's a higher quality sherry or something that it was aged in. But think about the difference in price, $800. Is it really going to be that much better? It's just when you add that brand name, it's going to jack up the price quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. We see that in a lot of wines and spirits and things like that. Here's a question I have as I'm thinking about this. When I'm thinking about, you see so much, here on the table, 14, 15, 16-year-old Scotch. They're distilling all the time. When I think about bourbon, they're always distilling. They got rick house, they put it in. It comes out, it can be younger juice. This is all older. How much real estate do they have to be able to, because it's got to be barreled right away. I mean, how big are these? Are they called brick houses? What are they called? How big are these places where they're storing the Scotch?
I think they normally just call them warehouses, but there are some places, a lot of them will be aged together. So there are some kind of mega warehouses in Speyside where multiple distilleries will bring their stuff there.
Okay.
Some of them are underground. I went to one, Talisker. All of their aging is done underground in these kind of bunkers. So it's designed very differently from a rick house, which is designed to pump as much heat and change as possible into the barrels.
And with Scotch, like a cognac, it's going to be aged. If it's going to be aged longer, and it does tend to be aged longer than bourbon, because how many bourbons do you know that are even 18 years old?
Yeah, no,
pretty rare.
Yeah, there aren't a ton, and so to allow the aging and to not have it become overpowering, they need to have that cooler climate. Again, like cognac, it's going to be kept. That can age 50 years, 100 years.
Right. And that's what I was thinking. Just with the amount of aging you're getting, I mean, if you're just producing every year. And you got to wait. That's a lot of real estate you're starting to take up.
That's where the independent bottlers come in, because they will both go buy casks that are ready to bottle, but like Cadenhead is one, they will go buy barrels that are maybe 2 or 3 years old that the distillery just, like, we've got too many from this particular year. Why don't you come buy 100 barrels? And they'll go take them and age them somewhere else. So you'll see that selling them off to independent bottlers. They'll kind of find ways to not have to sit on them for 15 years.
Okay. Here's a question that I have. Scotch. You don't see it on a lot of cocktail menus. Is there a reason for that? Is it just thought of to be too sophisticated a whiskey that, don't ruin it by trying to make something
Generally,
else
it's too expensive to make the economics work for cocktails. I mean, you'll see it, but a lot of times when you do, it's probably going to be something blended. It's not going to be 15-year-old Scotch going into. Why would you want to do that?
It's going to be blended.
Yeah,
almost every time.
And because they don't make, it starts at just a higher level. We think about bourbon. You can get an inexpensive bourbon, a Wild Turkey 101, still quality product, but you're okay.
I think it's just the profile. It goes back to in the world, Scotch is tremendously popular, but in the United States. There's, again, getting back to the beginning of the conversation, people just have a misconception about the flavor of it, and they just don't want it. So vodka is the most popular spirit because most people don't want to taste anything, and Scotch is going to be a banger of a cocktail.
Okay.
Because it's got a lot of flavor, and it's not a flavor profile that your common drinker wants in a cocktail.
But
there's lots of great Scotch cocktails out
there. There are.
Isn't I don't want to speak wrong. Isn't a highball blended Scotch? What is in that?
A lot. You can make a highball out of anything, but yeah, it's a really common one.
Yeah.
Or Japanese whiskey.
I'm trying to think what else.
See that a lot.
See, I actually don't drink a lot of whiskey cocktails, but I see Scotch often. It's more of a craft cocktail bar. We'll have plenty of options, but not your. Again, go into an average bar, they probably aren't going to have many Scotch cocktails, more than one.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever, when I've looked at a cocktail menu, ever remember seeing Scotch.
You see a lot of Japanese whiskey cocktails.
Okay,
I think more than Scotch.
Okay, which is still similar profile as
it's Scotch, not made in Scotland.
Yeah,
but
a little lighter.
Two of my favorite, I had to double check on one of them, but two of my favorite cocktails, Rusty Nail and a Bobby Burns, are both Scotch cocktails.
Okay, give us what's in those?
So a Bobby Burns is Scotch Vermouth Benedictine, and Rusty Nail is Scotch and Drambuie. Yeah, it's just Scotch and Drambuie.
Okay, I don't know what Drambuie is.
It's a Scotch liqueur.
Okay.
It's really nice for cocktails.
Really?
It adds that little bit of earthiness. Maybe I would even say smokiness. I like it. As well with mezcal and things like that too.
There's another one called Elderflower Thistle, which is Saint Germain and Scotch, which is really nice. So there are really good Scotch cocktails. They're just not nearly as popular.
Okay.
And so it's inherently not going to be used in cocktails.
And your point of the economics of it makes sense too. Yeah. Why would you? But I want to go back to just the process of making Scotch real quick. That just kind of came to my mind. We talk about bourbon, and the rule is it's got to be at least 51% corn. It can be much more than that. It could be right on that number. Is there we call that the mash bill, kind of the recipe, what you're doing with it, the other grains you might put in, whether it's wheat or rye or whatever. Is it similar in Scotch? Is there?
Well, it has to be malted barley, 100%.
Single malt has to be 100% malted
okay,
barley.
and if it's blended,
well, if you're making like a single grain, it can be barley, wheat, rye, or corn,
and percentages don't matter,
or any mix thereof. Yeah.
Okay, so that's their version of a whiskey when we call it just a whiskey.
Yeah.
Okay. And let me ask you this: is there different? We think about corn. We think there's different types of corn that somebody might use. I mean, there's just so many different types of corn, and I think of Iron Root here in Texas, who does a pretty good job of playing with some stuff and coming up with some cool things. Is that the same in peat? Is there different or malted barley? Is there different types of barley? Or is it just does it matter where it's grown? Does it have a different profile from different regions, or is it just pretty much the distiller?
Well, yeah, I think there's gonna be a variety, and again, because it doesn't have to come from Scotland, it's gonna taste different, and so each distillery is gonna have a barley that they want to use that makes their profile. Again, outside of the environmental factors of where they are they located up high, or are they on Isla, and there's the salt water. That's another thing that's going to help give variety to the product.
But interestingly, not every distillery has a malting facility. And in fact, like in Speyside, there are a couple of really large ones that multiple distilleries buy from. So they're literally using the same product. They're just running it through their stills and aging it their way. So there can be, and I'm sure there are preferences on the type of barley and where it comes from and all that. But there are also times where everybody's kind of using the same thing. So it just kind of depends. So
where would the barley come from if it's not coming from Scotland? I mean,
I think a lot of it comes from Ukraine.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So mostly in Europe?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you guys want to dive into a couple of these? And
I'm ready. I've been sitting here looking at this glass.
Yeah. Well, what do we have poured first?
So the first one that we picked to go through is from a producer called Balvenie, one of the kind of more well-known, but I think it's become more well-known in the last 20 years or so. But it's very popular now. This is a 14-year. It's called their Caribbean cask, so it is finished in rum casks. And the reason we're starting here is this is a really, really good gateway Scotch. I've tried a lot of friends on this one that are bourbon drinkers try this, and it's got a little more sweetness. That's one of the differences to me. Bourbon has a sweeter profile generally than Scotch. A lot of Scotch is more dry and not as sweet. This one's got a little bit more of the sweetness, I think, just either from the rum casks or just the way that they're producing it. It's meant to be more approachable. So 14 years, which a little older than the kind of 12-year starting point, but still very much in that same vein. You can tell it's pretty light in color. It's just a good starting point.
So when you're an entry-level person getting into Scotch, price point should be between what, $6,500, $6,590, kind of live in that. And then as you go through and you look at different producers, do you start with their entry-level product, something that's just kind of their in that price point? Should you go through all the distillers?
Yeah,
should you go to one and go through what
just
they
like
have?
with bourbon. I think it's important to go to a bar and taste the entry level product. If you like that, you're probably going to like the higher age stuff.
Okay.
Now this one has gone up in price because this is an old bottle. This one's now $94 at Total Wine. I didn't realize it had gotten that expensive. So
I would pay
still
for it.
sub 100 for
still
a
sub
14-year-old.
100. I seem to remember paying under $70 for it.
Okay.
But that bottle's been open for a little while. But to back up, completely agree with Todd. I think instead of saying, let me go try everything that Balvenie makes or everything that Macallan makes, try everybody's entry level, because that'll tell you whether you like that region, that distillery or not. Then you can go explore the other things, and you're going to spend a lot less money doing it.
Okay.
Like
even if you like their entry level, you go, man, this is banging. This is really good. Don't just live in that producer. Still explore what's out there in Scotch, the whole world. Kind of get a feel for what the landscape is in the world of Scotch before you start.
Well, like Glendronach, if you try their 12-year and you're like, man, I really like this producer, and most people are going to like it. If you see a special one come out that's a 19-year single barrel and you want to go buy it, I'm not telling people not to do that, but I think it's better to spend your money on a variety of different distilleries before you just go gung-ho all through one.
Okay. You agree with that, Todd?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, of course, I want people to diversify and go out and try a bunch of different stuff. But yeah, if they want to stick with one distillery for a couple bottles, that's fine until they get used to other styles. But like we said, with Speyside, maybe if you like that, try another Speyside, and then maybe try something from the Highlands, because that is going to be maybe the next closest and similar style.
So
Agreed.
what? Go ahead.
I was just saying I agree.
Oh, okay.
And this bottle, the Balvenie Caribbean cask, 14-year-old, the other one that Tyler and I talked about as an entry level that I think a lot of people that I know getting into Scotch is the Balvenie Doublewood, which is, I forget what it's a regular oak cask, and I forget what the secondary sherry. Okay,
it's $70 at Total Wine right now. So there are less expensive bottles you can get, but I'd say that's a pretty good baseline. $60 to $70
and it's available at almost every bar that has Scotch. So
I hate to say if you don't like Doublewood, you're not going to like Scotch, but that's one that if you're like, I can't get into this.
I agree.
It's hard not to like that.
It's an easy bottle. It's the first bottle I got into, actually. I think it's a common story. Most people like that.
Yeah. Well, I was right out of college. I was going to a friend's house for a Scotch tasting event. I went by the big liquor store living in San Antonio, and he was like, "Oh, you should get this. It's great." I remember it being like 50 something bucks at the time, maybe even under 50. And we went to this thing, and there were some really good bottles, and I just remember thinking, I really like this. There's something about it. And so then started trying other things. And I mean, I think it's been the same story for a lot. Whether they come from, I was not coming from a bourbon background at that point. It was kind of the first spirit that I really got into with Scotch. But there are a lot of people that come from maybe bourbon or tequila or rum, that it's just a really good segue into the world of Scotch.
I'll tell you what, this is delicious. Mm-hmm. This is really good. So people are listening going, hey, hold on, guys. You guys aren't telling me who I should be seeking out and dabbling with first on their entry-level products, because you mentioned there's 150 distilleries over there. And when we talk about bourbon, my recommendation is always to go to the biggest, Jim Beam or Four Roses or Wild Turkey, whoever. And then there's a handful of them, like to your point. So it's not hard to explore those. Do you have 5 that you guys would say, hey, look, if you're going to start, or is that a low number?
I think that it is similar to bourbon in that the big guys do tend to put out good product because they do a lot of volume. They've been doing it for a long time, most of them, and they have a variety of products that you can try. So, and they're able to put out a 12-year maybe cheaper than a smaller distillery can.
I think if it's within your budget, there's not a single distillery I would say to steer clear of.
Okay. So, because again, I get back to what I said earlier on, where you go to the wall for Scotch at a store and you're like, holy crap. And then you go, okay, make sure it's just a quality producer. I don't even know that.
I like Tyler's answer better than better than us trying to name 5, because we're going to name the 5 most heavily marketed. And I don't like that. I would rather people go out there and just buy a bottle of Scotch.
All right. If I was going to name 5 of something different to try that maybe you wouldn't, Tamdu is probably one of those. We have that in front of us. It's a great, just sherry bomb, middle of the road, not super expensive. Mm-hmm. I would say Oban. It's another one we have on the table. It's kind of a lesser known one that is fantastic. Going to Isla, I really like Ardbeg a lot. Also like Kalila.
It's more affordable also.
A little more affordable. Lagavulin is one of the really, really well-known ones. The 16-year Lagavulin is one of the best general offerings from Isla, I think.
Yeah.
Of just the core offerings, one of the best.
I don't know if it's entry level, but it's a good entry-ish level Isla.
Still not super expensive.
And it's not super peaty. Like a lot of, when you talk about peat, and I know we'll get to Isla, but Lafroig is the one that everyone thinks of because it's the most peaty.
Okay, Lagavulin 16 is cheaper than Balvenie Caribbean cask. It's $92. And to me, it's more like smoked meat with a little bit of sherry. It's not the iodine and wood smoke. It's almost like a smoked meat.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like barbecue in a bottle.
Mm-hmm. I would add Glenallachie as a brand that right now. So it's the Billy Walker was the master distiller at Glendronach, and both Tyler and I said we love Glendronach. He left there and he's been working at Glenallachie now, and Glenallachie is also Speyside. Mm-hmm. And still affordable. I think the prices are going to shoot up, but they have a lot of offerings, and some of it younger that's actually quite good.
Okay.
But I mean, you get into Speyside, there's a lot that are not as well known that are phenomenal. Like Cragganmore is really, really good. Kergeliki is really good. Yeah,
I mean, if you're saying you're pretty much safe, you're not going to get a bad product. You're not going to grossly overpay. People aren't, it's pretty competitive in the Scotch world that, we talked about, what you're paying for the age statement. Then that's fine. I just didn't know if there's some where you go, look, I always come back to bourbon and think about the micro distillers where you go, it's a 4-year-old bourbon, they want $110 for it. And, the taters are buying it.
I would say maybe the only thing to steer clear of, like if you have some money and you want to splash it out, maybe don't start with Octomore. That's the most heavily peated Scotch there is. It's going to knock your head off. I mean, if you want to, go for it.
Well, here's a question. Do you have to know the region? We think about wine again. You have to know the region to know in Europe to know what the grapes are. Do you have to know the producer and the region to know if it's peated or not? It doesn't say on the bottle, does it?
No. Usually it will not. Generally speaking, if you don't want to try peated yet, I would just steer clear of Isla.
Okay.
Actually steer clear of any of the islands.
I think to start, you need to know if you like peat or not.
Yeah.
And because that's the biggest turnoff, because it goes back to what we said about the biggest misconception is that all Scotch is peated or that it's all smoky.
Yeah. Okay, fair point.
Because that's the most divisive, and when we get to it, you'll see the variety of how crazy it can get.
And this circles back to, all right, if I was going to tell somebody that knows nothing about Scotch, I would say go spend $75 or less on a Speyside bottle. Mm-hmm. Any of them. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's under $75 or so and that fits your budget, that's going to be a good buy. It's not going to be peated. Very rarely will you see a peated Speyside. They exist, but it's usually one-offs. They're always going to be good. There's not a ton of variation. Like in Highland, there's a lot of variation. Speyside's all pretty similar. It's kind of hard to go wrong there.
Okay.
I mean, another one that I think we haven't really talked about is we were kind of crapping on Lowland a little bit, but Oakentoshan is a really, really good entry-level distillery that's just really easy to drink, really nice,
affordable.
Very affordable because no one's ever
Get
heard of
bottles
it.
$40-$50, right?
Yeah, they have one called, I think, the 3-wood or triple wood. I forget what it's called. Great entry level.
This is delicious. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I can see where you can say it's that transitional kind of pour because it's not.
I'm excited that you say that because I think it's probably the worst bottle on the table by some margin.
Is it really?
Yes.
But again, it's the most approachable, and it's one of the main bottles I will put somebody in who wants to get into Scotch.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really good.
It's uphill from here.
Is it really?
Yeah.
All right.
And I don't say that to say that I don't like it. It's great, but it's the other things I think we have on the table are better.
I mean, the bar is pretty high if that's the floor.
Yeah. So what we'll go to next, even though it's 4 years younger, you can tell by the color it's quite a bit more developed. It's fully matured in sherry instead of Caribbean cask. Is most of its life is in ex-bourbon barrels, and they just do rum barrels right at the end. This is fully sherry. This, to me, if you say what does Speyside taste like, it's this or something along these lines.
So when you talked about the 14-year that we started with in the Caribbean finish, in the rum barrels, talk us through what I might get on that. I mean, I'm not going to give a bunch of descriptors, but to me, it's an easy drinker. It's got good flavor. It's not overpowering. It's easy on the palate as far as alcohol. What's the proof on this?
Which one?
They're both 86.
They're both 86. Okay. But I just think it has good flavor to it.
Have you tried this one yet?
No, not yet.
You're going to tell the difference in mouthfeel, even though they're the same proof.
Okay.
I think this has a little bit thicker mouthfeel. I think the marketing, the fact that I know it's rum barrels and they call it Caribbean cask, I get tropical fruits on that one. Pineapples, mangoes, things like that may or may not exist. It may just be in my head because of what they call it, but it is that kind of lighter estery flavor that you will get on Scotch sometimes. I have one at home that it's the Benriach I mentioned, straight up tastes like pineapples.
Really?
It's bizarre, but it's delicious.
Definitely a bigger, more powerful nose on this one.
Yeah.
So let me read. I pulled some tasting notes from each of the regions, which I think is good as we go through them.
Yeah.
Because you ask about comparing them, and I think that it's fairly spot on. So Speyside whiskeys are known for being frugal with peat and full of fruit. Most of them have no peat. Apple, pear, honey, vanilla, and spice all have a role in expressions from this region, which are commonly matured in sherry casks. So it tends to be just fruity.
A common one that I love, British tasting notes, Scottish tasting notes. One of the ones that you see a lot is like Christmas pudding or Christmas cake, fruit cake.
Yeah, and treacle.
Yes.
And Christmas, talking about the spices that you get.
The spice and the fruit, the like stewed down fruits. That's what I get a lot on this is just like stewed down fruits.
Mm-hmm. So more rich.
Yes.
In case you didn't say the name, this is the Tamdu 10.
Yes, sorry.
TAMDHU.
So this is a 10-year-old Scotch versus 14.
Yes.
But it seems to have...
That's the sherry barrel.
Okay.
It's more intense in flavor, I think. I mean, it's despite being the same proof, like this drink's a little bit hotter than the Balvenie.
And I think it has a stronger mouthfeel.
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling the Caribbean cask comes out of the barrel at a higher proof, and they have to dilute it more than the Tamdu.
Yeah. Also, you have to consider, just like in bourbon, when they're going to do something like a rum cask, is that their best quality casks? Maybe not.
Yeah.
They're not going to tell you that.
Well, and another thing they'll
just a
do with
guess.
sherry, as opposed to, because rum is a spirit and sherry is obviously a wine, one of the things they'll do with these barrels is they'll put them into a wet barrel or a recharged barrel where they say, well, we've shipped this barrel from Spain, it's dry, we're going to put some sherry back into it to reinvigorate it. They don't always dump it all out, which is one of the reasons you get a lot of color on them.
Yeah,
because
and I don't know in Scotch if there's even a rule that, so when you hear the term wet, it could mean that it was just freshly dumped, so there's still a lot in the wood there, or as Tyler said, they can recharge it. They can literally just dump, a couple gallons of sherry in
slosh it around and try. We tried to pour it out, and not all that came out. There's definitely some level of that.
So when we talk about, well, let me ask you this. You're saying sherry cask, but I hear a lot of people get excited when they hear Oloroso.
Well, there's different kinds of sherry, and I don't think I brought it.
I brought an Oloroso.
Okay, Oloroso is one of the heavier ones. PX, Pedro Jimenez, is going to be the most.
And Oloroso's thick. I
Yes.
find that, like in all spirits, including rum, it tends to create a thicker mouthfeel.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like a different sweetness than
Yeah.
regular sherry.
But I mean, I have a
Almost nutty, a little maybe.
I have a Glenmorangie at home that's in Amontillado cask, so a really light sherry, completely different. It's very light in color, light in body, even though it's a sherry cask. I've had one, I think, Glenmorangie, or I don't remember who made it. They made one in Fino, which is the lightest sherry. It's basically just white.
And the type of sherry matters. And in the blends, not as much will you be able to pick out the specific sherry, but in single barrels, like the one I brought, you can compare one to another, and they're both PX casks, and they can be significantly different because the quality of the sherry that's used can really shine through and just really improve the Scotch.
Man, I forgot how good that Tamdu is. I love
Yeah,
that one.
that is very
me too.
good.
It is very good.
And it's not expensive. Let me look it up real quick.
And while you're looking that up, when I hear, and I brought up the Oloroso because it seems like when I've heard people talk about Scotch, they get a little more excited when it's that sherry versus.
That's your marketing.
Okay.
PX is probably the most popular because people hear that and they just go crazy.
PX and Oloroso are definitely the big ones.
Do you want to go to the Glendro 18 while we're in Speyside?
So I don't know if they discontinued this, but they do not have it on. I'm just pricing everything on Total Wine because most people listening will have a Total Wine somewhere near them. They only have a 12 listed on here. They don't have the 10 list. Oh, there we go. 10-year, $61.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing for
that
price.
Yes.
That's a great price.
In fact, maybe I would change my answer. Just go buy a bottle of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. It's a pretty bottle, too. I like the bottle. That's just me being a tater.
So let me ask you this: there's no influence to you guys on whether it's finished or not. That doesn't make a difference. But would you recommend that?
Well, it does. It does to me.
It does.
I mean,
to you.
I like sherried Scotch.
Oh, I do
Okay.
too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're shopping, if you see things that are finished, if you know you like sherry, finishing barrels, rums, these might help the
100%.
transition into.
I don't know that there's anything on the table that is unpeated and unfinished.
Okay.
Just pure bourbon barrel, maybe the Kilkerran.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very common thing. You're going to see.
Yeah, sherry's the
of
most common.
15
Okay.
whatever bottles we brought one that's not either aged in some other barrel or peated because it's adding some dimension of flavor. I'm not going to say it's boring, but it kind of is.
Okay.
Not to say it's bad. It's just
Well, it's a used barrel. There's not a whole lot of influence that's going to come from that, and so
it is interesting, and it's a bottle I thought about bringing, but we have so many bottles to get through. But I have an Abalur, and that's the Abunad Abalur is a very popular. It's another
It is the cast
$100
strength that everybody got
Yeah.
super crazy
It's
about.
$100 sherried Scotch, maybe a little bit more than that now, but it's another really popular one
And
that I would recommend.
It's 115 proof.
It's high. It's close to cast strength.
Yeah.
I don't remember the specific proof, but so I have a single barrel of Aberlour aged in just
same
oak,
glass.
Yeah.
Okay.
aged in oak casks, and it looks like this Oban. Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
like the Caribbean cask. It's super light, and it's just all peaches and like super fruity. So it just
Todd,
shows.
get some? Yeah,
No, not yet. It shows the difference and.
Okay, this is the 18-year that you're talking about. You like
these are
Yeah, and so I should mention this is not an 18-year. This is a 20.
Wait, no, it says 18.
the stock.
Explain that.
Yeah.
So this distillery closed down in April of '96. It was bought, it was shut down, and 2001, I think it was May of 2001, it reopened. So anything that was produced that was bottled and sold in the teens, the 20 teens, would have had to be made before 96.
Okay.
So you can kind of walk that forward. This, I think, is a 2019. So it's actually 24 years old, even though it's labeled 18. And I paid the same price. They didn't change the price. And I paid $170, $180 for that. And it's actually a 23 whatever year
Wow.
Scotch.
So let me read the notes on the back, and mainly because I just said the word treacle, and it says that on the back.
It's one of their favorites.
Let's see. Palate, stewed fruits, orange peel, baked sultana bread. I don't know what that is. Bound by robust allspice.
Sultana is just the British word for raisin.
Okay. Bound by robust allspice, cigar box, and leather. Finished caramelized walnut, treacle, and date oil.
This reminds me of when you make those cakes and you would pour the like sugar syrup on it, and that sugar syrup would like crystallize on the edges.
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of.
This is, I think, where you can see the difference in so this is a Highland, or I'm sorry, a Highland. And we just came from Speyside. So the first two Speysides we had, I think, were similar, right? This has just a slightly different kind of barley profile or grain. It's just a little bit more grainy, maybe. But also you get a lot of sherry, though, because this is a heavy. Look how dark it is. It's much darker than the other two bottles.
way darker.
Even putting it next to the Tamdu. Now, also, it's 8 years older, but it's a lot darker, and that's the sherry.
Or 14 years.
Now, I
older.
will say, this is not labeled Speyside, but I just mapped it. It is 29 miles from the Callan estate, just due east.
Which,
The Glendronach is. So it's
Okay.
not technically Speyside, but it's about as close as you can get without labeling it Speyside.
To me, the big difference for me on the nose is there's just this depth, this kind of complexity there, that this
that's the
power
age.
behind it that I'm going, this is going to be good on the palate. It's setting the expectation. The other ones were very nice, but it didn't have that kind of power that I'm getting on this.
Yeah, this one is one of my favorite just regular offerings. Even the current one, which people will say under the new ownership it doesn't taste the same. I think it's very,
it's
very
chill
similar.
filtered now. So
Yeah.
just like in bourbon, everyone's like, oh, I'm not going to buy it now.
Yeah.
It's still
Whatever.
phenomenal.
But I mean, the profile has not really changed much, and it's still it's not cheap. I mean, recognize $220 is not cheap.
But for $200, though, I don't know that you could do better. It's great.
Tough.
Yeah, it's just great.
But again, getting
It goes
back
great with a cigar also. Like you can taste like,
There's enough sweetness.
yeah.
Did you say there is a little peat or no peat on this?
None.
None.
Yeah, I know what you're thinking because I
Yeah.
thought that coming from the Speysides, I did think that I tasted like a touch.
Just a touch.
Yeah, but I don't think that they use it at all, right? Yeah.
Okay.
But that's where you when you get into different Scotch, when people say that they think it's peated, that's what you're tasting. It's just that earthiness.
Okay.
But when we get to the peated, you'll see the difference.
Okay.
Now, we'll
Yeah.
say that has more earthiness in it
Yeah.
than the other ones, but it's not
For
a
sure.
smoky earthiness. It's just
Yeah.
earth.
Okay. This is delicious. Readily available?
The forest floor, as wine drinkers would like to say. Yes, widely available.
So we think about bourbon, and when you think, we call them the tater bottles or allocated bottles. Does Scotch have that, or is that the beauty? One of the beauties of Scotch is that
It
pretty
does.
much if you want it,
There
you
are.
can get it.
There are. Like Octomore is one that can be harder to find now.
Okay.
Lefroy every year puts out they call it the Cargis, and every year it's a different. They'll do
It's a good one.
like all different kind of wild stuff. It's different every year.
Okay.
Those can be harder to find.
Even like Specs has like Macallan 18. It's allocated in that you can only buy one bottle.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Like they have a limit one on it.
Imagine wanting to buy 4 bottles in that.
But there's a whole smaller than bourbon contingent of Scotch people that hunt, and when bottles come out, they just are gone right away.
And it's so one of the ones that he mentioned, Glenallachie. It's one that kind of caught fire in some of the Facebook groups, and I wouldn't call it tater because it's very well made. It's not anything to do with the product. They've just put out really good stuff. People caught wind of it. The same thing with Glendronach. Nobody knew anything about it until people realized, hey, this is older than we thought, and it's really good. And it on the secondary market, it's kind of caught fire. I think that's cooled some, but there are definitely some distilleries. Springbank is one that you'll see people.
Very popular.
Longrow, which is also a Campbelltown. There are certain releases from them that will trade above retail. There's not a lot of Scotch that trades above retail, but there will be
you can get
some.
on the secondary groups online with Scotch. A lot of times, I've gotten deals where like let's say this Octomore here, the current edition is $220 or something like that, and it's 12. I brought 12.2. Someone might have 4.1, which is just it's years ago, and they paid at the time $100 for it, and they're selling it for $150. So you can get Scotch for lower than current retail, older editions. Because those people are just looking to make a few dollars. It's not like bourbon where it's, in many cases, in some cases it is, like the popular brands like Macallan again. I'm not trying to pick on them, but it is so popular that they get a huge premium.
They're the Weller of Scotch.
But you can get great Scotch, older Scotch, for a very fair price.
Okay.
Except that it's good.
All right, Weller's not good.
Just kidding. Trying to get a rise out of people.
So this one
think you did.
that we poured now is another Glendronach, and I brought this one because I wanted to compare. So the 18 is a phenomenal, easy to find bottle. This is a spec single barrel. It's 29 years old, and it's a single barrel.
So
Oloroso.
is that age dated 1992? Is that what that is?
92.
Okay.
29 years old. 675 bottles. So it came from an Oloroso punch-in, which is a very big barrel.
Yeah.
So and they don't have a lot of loss on these. So these barrels are huge. But you can see the color. It's the darkest that we've had so far.
Oh man, that's good.
So,
But it's still the same. There's still that earthy character. You can tell.
yeah, the
it's
nose
same
was
distillery.
yeah, the nose was very
The
similar.
sherry tends to pick up in these more. So you're getting a heavy sherry influence. But yeah, it does have that similar character still. It doesn't completely overpower what
Okay,
Glendronach tastes like.
Very different on the palate though. Way more oily.
Well, it's
This is the Oloroso.
Okay.
57%,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
as opposed to what 46.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's
Okay. Got a lot more proof to it.
10%
So
higher,
that's something to
the
talk
highest
about.
proof we've had so far.
and maybe the highest proof we will have.
Yeah.
We talked earlier that proof's not really spoken about in the world of Scotch because that doesn't necessarily define flavor or quality. But this seems very high. What is this?
And that's just because it's a single barrel, and that's how they release them. Yeah,
Okay.
they just do the single barrels at cast strength, but at this level, you get like raisins and dates, and
Yeah.
it's just like really the age plus the sherry kind of brings in a whole different profile.
What I will do,
Drink's underproof, I think.
what I just did, I took a sip of it at cast strength. I will add some water because one of two things will happen. It's either going to get better or it's going to fall apart.
Oh, really?
I think so. Adding a little bit of water either unlocks some additional stuff, or it'll just kind of fall apart and won't taste like anything. I doubt it'll be the latter.
No,
Right,
it should do fine with water.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially at that proof. You have room to go down. It should just make it fruitier. I mean, it tends. I feel like normally you get more fruity characteristics with water on something like this.
I put a little water in there. The Ralphie method. 5 milliliters.
That's good stuff. That's really good stuff. That distillery just almost can do no wrong for me.
A little bit different in price. So the Glendronach 18 is $220 currently. I think this one was close to $1,000.
Okay, I that's $1,000. Holy shit! Thank you, Todd.
With Scotch, once
Holy
you get
cow.
to like 25, like my favorite 25 is probably the Balvenie, and that's like $800, $900. And
you
it
have
just
the
it
Glenfarclas?
escalates. The Farkless 25, yeah. That's a
very
good
good.
value one. That's cheaper.
Glenfarclas is not very well. It's family owned, so they're not paying investors. It's not very well marketed. In fact, outside of kind of more hardcore Scotch drinkers, no one's really ever heard of it. But all of their products are extremely good value buys.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
How much is their
The 25 is way cheaper. I mean, I want to say it's like $300.
I put a drop of water in here, and the fruit now just kind of explodes for me.
Their 25 is less than Glendronach 18.
Less. Wow.
$219.
Wow. Yeah, that's insane.
I don't think it's better. I still think the Glendronach 18 is better.
For sure, but it's a
But
highly
if you want,
aged Scotch.
If
for
you
a
want
great
to
price.
buy something that is more advanced aged, for no other reason than just to kind of have something a little older, that's a really, really good one.
That's delicious.
I think Todd's ruined you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to go. I mean, we were already doing the Glendronach, but
Holy
the
cow,
bottle's phenomenal.
that is like...
Well, we can just stop the podcast there.
Okay, what are we going to next?
So this is this is where we get into the interesting pronunciation of Scotch. This is it Bunnahabhain, and it's spelled in a way that you probably wouldn't say that. So this is what is this, a 10-year?
I wouldn't even know
10 year.
how to say that.
10-year, but look at the color.
2012, super dark.
Finished?
This is fully matured first fill sherry butt. So that's another thing that you'll see labeled as first fill, which means it's the first time it's been reused. Because every time after that, it's going to get less and less from the sherry butt or
from-
whatever.
yeah.
These
So you'll
casks
see
could be
second
used
fill, third fill.
3-4 times, and each
Okay.
time until it's dead, basically, and that's when they can recharge it. But yeah, so first fill, you should expect a pretty heavy finish, and this one is very heavy. I mean, look at it; it's almost red.
Yeah, and still no peat.
No peat.
No, which is unusual because it's from Islay, which is normally considered, heavy peat, but Bunnahabhain is generally all going to be unpeated. And in fact, their entry level, just plain Bunnahabhain 12, is a really, really good starting point.
And the funny thing about the fact that this is the one Islay that's not peated is the bottle that I brought is they have one peated release called Octomore, which
And
is
the most.
the highest content, most aggressive.
I mean, you talked about cooked fruit. This, to me, I get way cooked fruit on this. This is stewed.
This is what we call a sherry bomb. You've had sherry finishes, and
Yeah.
I would say that Glendronach we just had, it's a sherry bomb because of the age, but this is a young sherry bomb.
Okay.
Yet only 10 years old. But if you tried that blind, I don't think many people would pick Islay out.
And this is the highest proof also, 64.7.
Okay,
Oh,
that's
wow.
the highest then.
Well, actually, the Octomore may be higher, but this is pretty high, though.
This is
Oh, I wouldn't think about the Octomore. You're right.
129.4.
No, this is higher. This is 59.9.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, about 120.
It's because it's so young and hasn't had time to lose or have water drawn in.
I love this bottle.
I do too.
I just can't get over nosing it.
Well,
I
and
mean,
this one
that's-
is proof positive because there are people that will say Scotch isn't worth drinking until it's 12 years old.
Yeah.
And this is
That's
10
a 10-year. So that is.
But I think this cask, particularly this cask, and this is one that's been popular locally. A lot of people bought these and cleared the shelf as soon as we all talked about it, about how good it was. I think this is probably a good example of an excellent sherry cask. Now, we don't know what brand or we don't know anything about it, but you kind of can taste the quality of the sherry sometimes, especially in younger scotches like this, first fill, where that sherry quality really comes through, and it can make the whiskey better than it was.
well, what you'll get on bad ones is a really acrid note and sulfur.
Sulfur, yeah. I don't really get the sulfur at all with
No.
this. It's just
Nope.
sweet.
It's a good cask.
Yeah.
A little bit of water helps in that one too.
I was going to do that next.
Just a
I
touch.
wanted to try it without it and then put it in, but I will say the little more bite on it. I don't know if it's my palate still adjusting to the.
No,
to
it's the proof.
It's the 64,
if it's
65%.
It's almost 130.
But what I would say is when you
But it does not. If bourbons that are
Bingo.
130,
Bingo.
knock your head off.
that's what I
Yeah,
was just
yeah.
going to say. It
It
still
does
does
drink
not.
Part of that is the age.
Doesn't beat you up like a bourbon at that proof.
I mean, you can. It's assertive. You can tell it's high proof,
Yeah,
but it's,
for sure.
it's more manageable.
Yeah, I think sherry softens it too.
I
Like
agree.
it just makes it easier,
Oh, okay,
more
okay.
palatable.
And when you say sherry, do we know which one on this? Is this PX or
It does not say.
does not say?
Just what does it say? Just sherry aged or sherry butt?
Yeah, first fill sherry butt. So it's a pretty big barrel. 606 bottles.
Okay.
It's pretty good size.
So that answers one of my questions. They do barrel picks with Scotch. That's usually what this is.
Usually only independent bottlers. You'll see single barrels produced under the label of the distillery like that Glendronach, but it's kind of unusual.
Okay.
But even like this one, that was selected by Specs. They just bottled it under the Glendronach label.
It is unusual though to see.
It's unusual.
Under the original brand, a single barrel.
Okay.
Actually, Glendronach's one of the few that I can think of that actually do it.
Yeah, I can't think of one offhand. I'm sure
Edged
there
Hour.
are others. Oh yeah.
That's
yeah.
the other one. Which
Another super heavy sherry.
We went to Edged Hour several years ago, and we walked in, and we were just going to kind of see the place. And they asked where we were from. Said, "Oh, we're from Texas." And they're like, "Oh, do you guys shop at Specs?" I'm like, "Yeah, we do." And they're like, "Oh, they had a team here like 2 weeks ago buying a bunch of stuff." They know them very, very. That's how much Specs goes over there
Wow.
and buys from them. Because you can walk into almost any Specs, and there will be at least 8 or 10 different Edged Hour single barrels that they've.
And that's
brought in.
another, I think, pretty good priced brand.
Really, really good.
Yeah, and Specs has a lot of variety, a lot of different options, and it tends to be very heavy sherry. Some of the
We're
older ones
spoiled
they
for that.
have
People
are the
outside
most.
of Texas won't be able to find nearly as much Edged Hour.
So do you two know why sherry? I mean, I'm thinking, Scotch, the age that it is, hundreds of years. Was it just trade? Did they find it and they just said, we don't know, but we're going to try, and it ended up being a beautiful thing? Or was it, how did sherry get into the picture?
Sherry is extremely popular in the UK.
Okay.
And so they would bring these barrels because back in the day, sherry was not bottled. Most wine was not bottled at an estate. You shipped barrels of it.
Right.
So there would be just all these barrels laying around in London and other parts of the UK that needed to be used. It's convenience, 100%.
Okay.
And then they realized,
And they're
hey, this
big.
is good.
It's good for aging Scotch
Yeah, they're
because
huge.
these huge barrels, it's not getting the wood influence. You can
Yeah,
age it
that
for a lot
surface
longer.
area is a lot. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So I think it was just kind of happy coincidence that it ended up being that. Sherry is the most common, but you'll see port as well. You'll see wine barrels from...
And they're not cheap.
From
Like
France and
I'm
stuff.
thinking of bourbon. Like the most common barrel in the world used is bourbon. It's tequila, it's rum. They all use it because it can only be used once in America. And
Scotch.
we produce so much of it. Yeah, everybody's using it. And sherry's more expensive. But again, it's big, and for them, it didn't have to travel as far. So like here, when you think of like a single malt producer in America like Balcones, the sherry butts that they get, they paid for that.
Yeah.
To have it shipped over these big casks.
Yeah.
It's
They're
going to have a
expensive.
higher price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's funny, we were walking around behind the hotel we were staying at in Scotland, and walking through the woods, we found a bunch of barrel heads, and we found some Jim Beam barrel heads
Really? Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
that had been discarded.
I would have thought you would have found Jack Daniels.
A lot of those too.
So it is a bourbon.
Of course it is.
I've got
more
this one
feathers.
staring me in the face, this Balvenie 15, and it's in a cask that is probably my favorite wine.
Madeira.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we can do that.
No, we don't need
I
to do
actually
that.
forgot
but
about
just
it. No,
like,
let's-
Yeah, let's do it.
I've been looking for an
I
excuse to open
don't think
it.
I've
so-
had it.
oh, if it's not open, don't open it.
Is that
I
a
brought it
airport?
for a reason.
Is
Yeah.
that an airport only?
Travel exclusive.
Yeah.
Which
Oh, is it really?
I tried not to bring stuff that was travel exclusive, but I've
Well,
been.
everybody travels.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody, but you can get it.
This one's been staring me in the face.
Okay, I got to
home,
tell
so-
you, each time I put a little splash of water,
It's
I
just
like it
something-
better.
It's something different.
Yeah. So this was.
but it softens it a little bit.
It started in
Especially
in,
the really high
in,
proof.
in bourbon barrels, and then it went to Madeira. It says bringing notes of fresh peaches, orange zest, and hazelnut.
Can I tell you that I like the finish on this? It's long, very, very long.
The Bunnahabhain?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also not like super aggressive. It's really a really nice
Just
finish.
lingers.
Yeah, it just lingers. Same glass, different glass. You poured a different glass.
Only because I wasn't done with the other one. But it doesn't
You,
matter.
you're okay with that. It's really the peated stuff that we want to have a fresh
Yeah.
glass for.
I didn't put that on, Todd.
Man.
Sorry.
That is good stuff.
86 proof.
Okay, that's got this sweetness to it.
It's going to come off very soft after, because we just came from high proof. So
What
I'm
is-
going to take a few sips. The first one might kind of be a little taste
Okay.
watered down.
Yeah.
This is 86. Gotcha. I'm going to have a little more of this one because it's so freaking good.
Which I guess
And this one was what, 128, 140
close to 130.
price?
Oh, the price, something like that. No more than that.
So
I was
not-
going to say 110 and 130.
Not cheap, especially for a 10-year, but it's worth it,
Yeah, for sure.
in my opinion.
And that's a signatory release.
That's one thing. You mentioned the Ralphie on YouTube. I really like well, what I've gotten from him is he's always like, get higher proof if you can. I mean, it's okay to don't steer
more
away
whiskey.
from it because you can always add water in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
lower it
you're getting
down.
more whiskey in every bottle.
That's the
Yeah.
benefit of the high proof.
Yeah.
This is good.
The Madeira.
It is coming
Haven't
off
tried it yet.
very soft because of what we just came from, but you can taste the Madeira. I think this is good.
Man, I just finished that. I didn't even dump the rest of that. That's so good. Wow. All right, I'm going to go to this Madeira.
Super fruity.
So this definitely doesn't have that richness to it. It's lighter. It's brighter.
Kind of dusty.
Yeah, I can see that.
I feel like I need to have a drink of water.
It is interestingly more light fruits
Like
than
peaches.
dark stewed fruits because Madeira is oxidized wine. It's super stewed fruits.
Right.
But that was a very dry cask, I think is what it means.
That's a good point because when I saw Madeira, I thought we were going to have more richness, more color.
I thought it was
than
going to
what
be super rich.
Right.
But
Yeah.
And the fact that they list peaches on there, which is, like a lighter, sweeter fruit, is interesting for a Madeira cask.
It's also worth noting this is finished, not
Like
fully
Crans.
aged like the other ones.
That's a very good point.
So it spent most of its life in bourbon barrels.
Yeah.
Which is,
And
it has the
doesn't say
vanilla,
how long, but I bet it's only maybe a couple of years, 2 or 3 years
probably.
in Madeira.
So yeah, you get a lot of that honey and vanilla from the bourbon.
This actually reminds me a lot of their Doublewood. It's a advanced version
Yeah.
of their Doublewood. So to give you an idea of what it would be like, it's much more developed and interesting to me than the Caribbean cask, which is why I would steer
totally
people
agree.
to the Doublewood instead of that one.
You remember the price on this? I don't think it's much. 120.
No, it was like somewhere.
Was it
in there.
more? Yeah, 120.
For a 15-year-old.
Between there and 150,
Yeah.
maybe. I have to go back and look.
I mean, I really like this, and I'm really starting to see how different Scotch can be. I mean, just completely different.
And,
Well, and-
we're all on the same range. Everything we've done, it's 3 different regions that we've done, but we've done it's all sherried and Madeira and Oloroso, and so they're
Yeah,
all
we really haven't strayed
similar.
very far.
Yeah, we're within a somewhat small profile right now.
I'll also
Really?
acknowledge we brought some of our favorite things. We have not had a bad thing yet, but I think we could bring you some of the worst things available on the shelf, and they would still be very good.
Okay. So basically, Scotch is just a quality product.
If you like it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say you can't go wrong. You can go wrong by the way you'll go wrong is by spending more than you probably should.
Okay.
Do Campbelltown next.
Yeah.
So
Shift gears a little bit.
Campbelltown is interesting. People like to say Campbelltown funk. It's hard to describe. Just like with like funk for rum, I mean, people will say like rotting fruit or I don't know how I would describe this actually, other than when you taste
Different.
this, it's going to be quite different than what you've had. So this is the Kilkerran 16. They peat some of their stuff. This is not peated.
What's the peated stuff is labeled under a different? Is it labeled under a different?
No, it'll just
Okay.
say, I have like an 8-year-old. It just says heavily peated. It says
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
front. It's the same label.
I think it's Longo and Springbank that are the ones that are peated, unpeated.
And actually, most of their stuff is not peated. The peated stuff is more recent I think, because they do an annual release that is a peated version of the 8-year-old. And I think there's maybe a peated version of this. I don't recall, of the 16.
I do see, Todd, what you were saying about going from that Glendronach to the that Balvenie Madeira. That first sip was just very thin.
Yeah, but
yeah.
it still has complexity. It's just it's the proof is the problem. So
Yeah.
it may be something to note, and I know it's been discussed on your other podcasts in the past. But if you're tasting, start low, go high.
Yeah.
because the high, and this is why we're not doing the Isla, because it will just destroy your palate.
Even at
it's
low
so
proof,
strong.
it will just.
Yeah, second sip of
Even the
that
nose
Madeira
on this
casting.
is much different. This is pretty light too. This Kilkerran, 16 years old. It's
So what does that tell you? That it was. This is not.
There's no
finished?
finish on it. There's no finish. That's what
You
it
definitely
is.
get the
It's typical color for Scotch. I mean, I've even seen 25-year-old Scotch with no finish that looks like this.
Okay.
It doesn't really get dark.
definitely get the ocean influence on that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's briny.
Wow, I like this nose. That's really nice.
So I think what we do is go from that to the Talisker, because the Talisker is essentially just a peated version of that.
Yeah.
Very, very similar.
It's going to taste similar.
Yeah.
So now we're going to jump into peat.
Yeah, but a very, very soft peat.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a good example. I mean, Campbelltown. I mean, it's similar to Isla in some way, like the Bunabin. It's an unpeated, but it has that briny, like seawater kind of note. Much different than the others.
Okay, that's way different. I still like that mouthfeel. That's got some. What's the?
It's got
proof
good
on?
finish.
Yeah.
This is 92.
Okay, I thought it was a little more than that, 86. But yeah, that's nice.
Okay, this one is lightly peated, but
Is
very,
it?
very
Okay.
15 ppm, so 15 parts per million, so very, very light.
Okay.
It's
Because I
there,
do
but
get
it's
that Band-Aid kind of iodine.
which when
And
you
I didn't
start
know if it
getting
was that earthy kind of.
well, the oceanside stuff will also bring in some iodine sometimes.
Okay.
That's why I say it tastes like a mild Isla, like a
Yeah.
super mild.
Well, actually, the Kalila is probably similar because Kalila is very lowly peated
Yeah.
too, but it's super good. So yeah, maybe that or the Talisker.
Do you think people, when you hear the peat, and people, a lot of people, their first initial response is they don't like it, and big part of that is
I didn't like it at first.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first bottles, I went to a store and I wanted to try Scotch, and they asked me if I liked peated or not. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, and I wouldn't do this now, but I said,
Like,
yeah,
sure.
sure, yeah, sure. And they gave me Goose Island 10, which is an ashtray.
Oh, really?
So it's young. It's not a, it's like we have the Lefroy 10 here. That's like the gold standard of 10-year-old peated.
That and Ardbeg are the
Yeah.
the 1 and 2.
Okay.
But it's so I got away from it, and then I found bourbon, and I liked the sweetness of the bourbon, and then I got back into Scotch. Started with sherried Scotch, like we said, that's a popular style, and then I'm just a nerd with spirits now. So peated to me is just like another weird thing. Like
Yeah.
it's another whole different profile.
Well-
so it took time for me, and now that I'm back in it, now I love like the Octomore, like not every day, but
There's something to me very
Come back
comforting
around.
about the peat. It's
Yeah.
like sitting by a fire. It's
Yeah.
reading an old dusty book.
What for me, it's what I don't understand, or maybe you can explain it to me. But I obviously haven't drank a lot of Scotch. But when I first got into whiskeys and bourbon, I tried a Scotch and it was peated and didn't like it at all. Fast forward a couple of years, I've had a lot of bourbon, revisit it, and all of a sudden I'm going, kind of like the peat now, and I don't know why that is.
I think it's just volume of drinking. I mean, anytime I talk to someone and they say, like, I like this brand, but not that brand, most people don't go down the rabbit hole of whatever the spirit is. The more you drink, the more I think your palate opens up and you and be more open to different flavors. And also, like, you've had, I'm sure, enough bourbon that you start to get tired of it. Or
Yes.
anything, any spirit. And so the peat is something new. And I think for myself, that's what happened. I came back to it, and at that point, it just wasn't repulsive to me anymore. And now I was like, okay, this is interesting because it's a whole different style, like completely different tasting notes.
So you
and
say
now
that,
I love it.
You say that to the bourbon drinkers listening to go, if you've been drinking, if you started out in bourbon, you loved bourbon, and you tried Scotch and didn't like it, the peat, and then you've been drinking bourbon for a period of time now, go back to it, is my point, because your palate's going to change. And I think that's true with food a lot of times. There's things that I
100%.
don't like, and then all of a sudden I do
There are
like it.
foods now that I crave that as a child and young adult I hated.
So yeah, to me, it's just, if you've been into bourbon for a little while, go back and keep exploring, keep trying, because like everything, your palate changes.
And come back multiple times. You may come back and not like it, but I think the type of person that if you don't immediately like a peated Scotch is somebody who has gone down the rabbit hole in a spirit. So if you've drank a lot of bourbon, I think that will open you up, because I think people who have tried a lot of things, their palate is more welcoming to different flavors, I guess.
And I will say, if you don't like peat, there's nothing wrong with you that you're not like an inferior Scotch drink. I know plenty of people that are more knowledgeable than me about Scotch and have really great palates, but just don't like it. And they don't drink it, but they drink everything else.
I just feel like if you made a point, I don't remember if it was on air or off air, Todd, that if you get down one rabbit hole a little bit, you kind of want to explore and go try other things. And I just don't know how, if you explore enough in the world of Scotch, you're not going to find something that you like. Because, I mean, I haven't had one tonight that I haven't liked. They've all been fantastic.
Like Tyler said, if you don't like something like a Balvenie Doublewood, you just don't like Scotch. If you like that, I think that there's a whole world that opens up, and then it can get pretty diverse, and you can kind of go down the paths of things like Isla.
Yeah, and if you buy a bottle, you don't like it, maybe come back to it in a year.
Mm-hmm.
So this one you just poured, this is Talisker?
Mm-hmm. So this is the only distillery on the Isle of Skye, so West Coast, gorgeous place. I get a ton of sea influence from this one.
Mm-hmm.
So very briny.
Yep, it's peated.
And they want you to taste that. I mean, it's called Dark Storm, and on the label it looks like stormy ocean, and at the bottom it says made by the sea. So they're leading you into it because that's where it comes from. I don't think this is a whole lot different from the Kilkerran that we just tried.
Very similar.
Because it's a little bit more peated, but the style is similar.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see a ton of color, so not finished.
I don't believe that one is.
Okay.
It's matured in selected heavily charred casks. That's all it says. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
assume
that's
that's
why
just
they call it the Dark Storm.
probably
they just kind
bourbon
of
casks.
recharge or rechar the barrels.
And proof on this one, right around that 86, 92?
43 or 46.
90.6.
90?
Okay, 45.
That's an odd one.
91.6. Yeah, that's a weird proof.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite distilleries. It's not one you see a whole lot, doesn't get a ton of love, but it's unique.
Okay. I get the peat now, Todd. That's completely different than the iodine I was getting earlier.
And
There is a little iodine,
it's
right?
peat,
Just a
but it's
little.
almost more like we were talking earlier about Scotch being, transporting you somewhere. That's like sitting on a beach next to a bonfire that you threw some seaweed on.
Okay. I do get the iodine, but it's way at the back.
Mm-hmm.
It's like on the finish end. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you want iodine, the next one, well, maybe the next one is Lafroig. That one is iodine bomb.
Okay, so this is to the point. I get the iodine way at the end. I didn't get it up front. I got more of that peat, but I do get it on the back. That last part of that finish.
And outside of the peat, Isla is a great example of like terroir, where you really get that ocean air and the saltiness and the brininess of it.
The way that my wife puts it, it's like licking the side of a cliff by the ocean.
Okay.
That's the way she describes this one.
I always seem to have a problem with brininess. I don't know if it's because I like salt so much that it doesn't hit me as hard as some other people, but
Meaning you don't taste it?
Yeah, I don't get it as much.
Well, that's not super briny. It's pretty subtle.
Okay.
There are examples where you get the brine a lot more. The next one that Tyler and I are pouring for ourselves now is the Lafroig 10. So this is an example of peat.
This is the stereotypical
I've heard this one
Band-Aid.
mentioned a lot.
Yeah, it's the peatiest brand overall.
People that hate it say that it tastes like wet Band-Aids.
Mm-hmm. It smells like
love
like
it.
a Band-Aid.
And this one also has a kind of special place to me. When we went back in 2015,
You're getting a little medicinal,
Yeah.
smoky, peaty. It's all there.
yeah, so we went several years ago. We rented a car, drove around for 3 weeks, and I bought a bottle of Lafroig in Glasgow and traveled around Scotland with it. So almost every night we would just pull that out and have a glass of it. So I associate this one with some very happy memories.
I was going to say, this triggers something.
I do like one of the things that got me into peat. I was reading I forget who it was. There was a show, I think it was HBO, a couple guys drinking scotch in Scotland, and just seeing like the rain and coming in to drink scotch by a fire and pouring something like this, like
Something very
the imagery
romantic
of
about
it. Yeah, there really is. And so if you just think of that while you're drinking this, it brings the whole picture together. Because again, this is a product of Scotland from Islay. It's a wet, salty place, and that's what it tastes like.
I mean, I totally get that wet Band-Aid you were mentioning. I mean, it's just I'm struggling to get past that.
Fair enough.
This is also it's again, this is like kind of the popular peated bottle, but it's a 10-year. It's young. It's brash. It doesn't have to be your favorite. And where we go from here, it's gonna. I don't know. Do we do the Octomore after that, or do you want to go the Kalila?
Yeah, probably. I would save the Octomore for last.
Yeah. But you don't have to love this.
But I fully understand there are a lot of Scotch drinkers that do not like it.
This is divisive, this bottle. But it's the entry-level peat bottle.
Maybe one of the most divisive.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for me, I would say on the palate, it doesn't have as much oomph going on. It's
No. It's
low proof.
It's low
It's
proof.
young.
What is it?
It's
86.
It's not matured in something else. It's just
Very thin on the palate.
But it has a longer finish because of the peat, like that. It lingers.
I don't mind the aromas and everything. I just don't. On the palate, I guess, is where I kind of got it. Like, okay, not sure how I feel, and maybe it'll be something that'll grow on me. But
it's maybe not as assertive with the flavors that we've experienced in the other ones. The sherry and those types of flavors. It's just kind of peat, and that's it.
I'm looking at the Kalila bottle, and this is 57% in sherry, so this is going to be quite a different animal.
It's a good one.
15 years old. I think this will be a good example of peat that you'll like.
Second sip, this isn't okay. It's kind of growing on,
and it starts to get a little sweetness also.
Yeah,
it does.
That's a great point because it does.
Once you kind of get past that initial shock, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, that second sip way better on that one.
I think what I tell people with bourbon, and especially like higher proof bourbon, is I think holds true here with anything like this that may be divisive or strong on the palate. Is first sip, get past that. Second sip, your palate's starting to adjust. By the third sip, if you don't like it, you're not going to like it.
Okay.
Right.
Kalila? Okay,
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So this is on the island of Islay, the very far northern tip. Not one of the more well-known ones. In fact, I think they only have one core bottling that comes to the U.S., and it's 10 or 12 year. Though it's kind of a rare distillery, but it's one of my favorites. And so I saw this at Specs. This is a 15-year sherry matured in a hogshead, so a little smaller barrel than a sherry butt, 57%.
Do you recall the price on this? Because we
120, 130, maybe.
Yeah, probably not more than that, because we were doing a signatory pick and in HBS, and there was a 17-year-old Kalila, and it was going to be sub $100.
Yeah.
So it's a good value.
It might have been right around 100.
Yeah.
Okay, before we go to that one, going to that one, that Lafroig 10, that third sip, now I get some sweetness.
You don't hate it now?
No, I don't hate it.
Oh, this is nice.
No, I don't hate it.
Yeah, you're going to like this, I think.
This one? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Kalila.
Well, this is the first one that we've had that is kind of integrating the peat and the sherry, which is a great match.
It really is.
I'm going to give a little palate cleanse.
A little sweet, a little
Yeah.
smoky.
It's that I was going to say the sulfur side of sherry, which is normally seen as a bad note, but it pairs well with the smokiness and the peatiness.
Rip, we have a couple dump glasses if you want to dump and try the other.
Oh, I'm good.
Okay.
I just don't want to drink too much.
He's got to catch up. Anyway.
That one also
That's
has
really
a
nice.
lot of peat on it for Kalila.
Is this finished? It's got this
Sherry.
sweetness on the nose.
Sherry.
Okay, it is.
100%
Okay.
sherry.
All right.
So yeah, this is sherry and peat together, so you can see
okay.
what that does.
But the peat's not. I mean, the sweetness to me on the nose is more up front than the
The
peat.
smoky is, yeah.
What-
what's the Lafroig that's a reasonable bottle, $70 that has sherry? It's is it Calderas?
I'm not
gonna have
sure.
to look it up. Because there's a good Lafroig that is much less aggressive that has, I think, a sherry finish. I'll look it up.
I'll tell you, the nose on this is amazing.
The stereotypical peat and sherry mix is the Lagavulin 16. It's the one that kind of put that on the map.
Okay.
Cardius, and it's
Well,
it's port and Madeira.
that's the annual one they do every year. So sometimes
that's a
port.
good
They've
one,
done
though.
a sherry one. They've done a port one.
Yeah, because
they
I
did
thought
one that was
I
only
had a
cask
sherry.
strength.
But yeah, that's a sub 100, I believe. Even I think
they're a
it's
little
70,
over that
80.
now.
Is it really?
I think so.
What's the proof on this? It's got some viscosity to it.
57,
Okay, yeah,
bit higher.
yeah.
This is good. I like this one.
Okay, the peatiness and everything's on the back end. That fruit's
Yep.
way on the front of the palate. Okay,
The finish is the peat.
yeah, big time.
So I think before the Octomore, we should go to our international selections because the Octomore is going to destroy your palate.
The Octomore is like drinking hot sauce.
Yeah, and what we just came from is fairly aggressive, but not that bad. So I would say let's go into the Amroot because that's a high proof sherried single malt.
Okay, so I'm finishing with this. What is this
Kalila.
one again?
Kalila.
Kalila.
And again, getting back to the spelling, learning the pronunciations
Oh, that's
of
half the
Scotch.
fun.
Yeah, so the spelling of this is Caolila. Yeah,
Yeah.
Cao. So it looks like cowl,
And you say
Kalila.
but it's
Kalila.
Kalila.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pronunciation's half the fun with this stuff.
Yeah,
But
there's a
again,
lot of
peated.
interesting ones. We haven't had any high difficulty level pronunciations.
Yet.
Bunnahabhain is one of the more tricky
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah, if you're reading it, if you're not just saying
Well,
it.
there's a
because
lot that I think
You mentioned
Americans say close to right that Scots will, like a lot of Americans say Balvenie. Scots would normally say Balvenie. It's close
Oh,
enough.
okay. All right, fair enough. I'll say on this one initially on the nose, it's not overpowering with the peat.
no, it's not super strong, and the
Yeah.
sherry,
Mellows that.
yeah, it makes it more subtle.
It's actually a very nice nose. I mean, that's. What's the proof? This is a lower proof. It's under 100.
No, this one's higher.
It is
57. I think.
57. Yeah.
that high. It doesn't seem like it on the nose.
I really like. I think Kalila is probably the most overlooked Isla distillery.
Yeah, it's
Really?
it's underrated.
Super
They put
underrated.
out- Good
Okay,
stuff.
see, guys, I asked you earlier which one's the underrated. This is it.
That for Isla, absolutely, that's one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you like Ledig is a good good
Yeah.
price.
So it's just a little bit up on the Isle
Yeah.
of Mull,
yeah.
but it's one of my favorite scotches I've ever had. Is one that I bought over there from there. It's 15-year first fill hogshead, and it is. I finished it about a year ago. It's been open since 2015. I finally finished
wow.
it like a little less than a year ago.
So, how would you describe the peat level on this? Is this low, medium,
Low to medium.
low,
Yeah.
medium? Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's not overpowering. to me.
Lafroig was high, and
Okay.
and yeah,
Moderate to
Kalila's-
high.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I would say the Lafroig was definitely.
But there's
higher.
different profile. Like Yedda Lafroig is higher, but a lot of that is also like the iodine and salinity character that makes it a little harsher. The actual smoke itself on Lafroig, I don't think is that high compared to like Ardbeg. Ardbeg is super high.
Okay.
yeah.
Just the like actual
It
smoke,
just feels more dense,
much more
densely
dense.
smoky.
Yeah, and then the Octomore is. I feel like we've scared him with the Octomore.
I'm not scared. I'm actually excited to
You
try that.
kind of should be.
I think it's one of those. You should be.
I love it.
I do too.
I
It's
feel
just
like it's
an
one of
oddity.
those things you're setting me up for this expectation, and I'm going to go, not that bad, boys.
no.
It's like the kid that you tell him how bad the roller coaster is. And
I don't think you're going
try
to say
freak
not
him
that
out.
bad.
No.
But it's not bad. That's the thing. It's as someone who appreciates spirits, I hope that you enjoy it because it's such an oddity and it's so medicinal and Band-Aid, and it's even the smell. I feel like I'm opening like a plastic box of medical supplies.
Okay.
You know, like the one
Really
you put in
selling
your
your
closet, and it's full of Band-Aids and plastic, and you know, it's very interesting. So the next one that I'm passing around is an Amroot, which is an Indian single malt. So I brought this because I wanted you to try, a Scotch basically not from Scotland, and Indian single malts are actually pretty good. So this is a sub $100 bottle. It's only 6 years old, so it's very young. It's heavily sherried. It's
dark.
So this is a sherry bomb. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the sherry. So this was picked for Whiskey Neat, and it was available for a while. I think this is an underrated bottle, but again, I think it's somewhat similar because it's got the sherry and the this actually is an unpeated. My bad. This is an unpeated. They normally do peated, but it's 120 proof. It's young.
I mean, you get
so
the
it's
sweetness on the nose right away.
It's a flavor bomb. So this is going to be quite different than what you just had, despite the fact that it's sherried
And it oddly does not smell.
at all.
Well,
Well, it's not peated though.
I don't. It may be because I know what it is, but I think if I smelled that in the lineup, I wouldn't think that it was Scotch.
Yeah, it kind of smells bourbony.
It does. It's because it's warmer.
Yeah.
The aging is in a warmer climate, and you can smell that.
Is there an age statement on this? Not, right?
6 years.
Oh, there is.
Yeah.
It is on there. Okay.
2014, bottled in 2020.
Which I mean, that's another indicator that
120 proof.
it smells like some of the single malts that are made in Texas.
And in some ways, it's similar to that. Because it's
that-
very high.
It's that dusty wood note that
temperature.
you can get from something that's younger.
I got it.
This is not like anything we've
Wow,
had so
it's
far.
so high proof. It's hot. It's quite hot.
What is the proof on this?
120.
And it
Yeah,
drinks,
it's
it
pretty
drinks
hot.
above that.
It does. Yeah, it's hot. It's very hot. But it's an interesting.
Well, especially compared to
This needs water. That's what I would say. Add water to this.
what was the Buna was the one that was 64. Which one was 64?
Where is the Buna?
Yeah, 65. It drank
Oh yeah, this is hotter. than
much
that,
lower.
for sure. But it's interesting as a single malt. This is pretty typical of what Indian single malts taste like. Heavily sherried, young. But I compare this to an American single malt. I think that's
Yeah.
a good comparison.
I think so.
Because what you're getting in Texas is even younger than this, and
3-4 years.
and it kind of has that funk that comes from the heat.
yes.
like
It's that-
grainy
I call it like dusty wood because I don't really know it. It's like sawdust.
water. Vastly improved it. I think. I just put a little
I
bit.
just put a little in after taking
It
this.
really sweetens it up quite a bit.
Because the first sip, I could see where you could go. Okay, this is a single malt. This is Scotch, so to speak. But it's nothing like what we.
It gets a little sulfury.
I don't
like when we
think I
talk
would
about
mistake
sherry.
that for Scotch.
Well, when I say Scotch, I'm talking about single malt.
Sure.
So I'm saying
It tastes like a malted whiskey. Yeah.
Yes, it's nothing like what we've had so far. It's not even close.
No.
It's way different.
I would place that as an American single
It
malt.
is. It's
Okay.
more similar to American single malt for sure. And I haven't had it in years.
I enjoy it,
It's
though.
interesting. Yeah, I do too. I mean, it has a place.
Yeah.
I think that'd be good with a cigar, a nice darker cigar.
Yeah, I didn't mind it at all. It just took me to a different place. It
Yeah.
wasn't anything
Well,
that I could.
and let's call a spade a spade. It's following some pretty tough bottles.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
for sure.
All right,
Yeah,
fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah. It's not in the
it's
same
a little
league.
out of place in that sense.
For sure.
If we were drinking like, let's look at American single malts.
But that's what we're doing here at the end is we're hitting the oddballs. So the next one I have is when you're done with that is the Yamazaki 18. So
Well, this is a
Tater box.
180.
this is, I would say, drink some water, let your palate calm down because I don't want to ruin it because this is delicate. It's a Japanese single malt, which is, again, it's Scotch, but it's made in Japan. It tends to be slightly lighter, fruity, crisp, very well balanced. This is a wonderful bottle. It is, as we discussed off the air, super hyped because it was
It's
the first
a
popular.
$250 bottle of whiskey.
Yeah.
And people pay $700.
Yeah, 250, 300 if we were pricing it based on the quality. Which
But it
now
goes
sells,
for how
it sells
much?
for like 650 retail now. And secondary is more like 800, 900. It's a wonderful bottle, so I would say drink some water. Make sure you have a fresh glass. You don't want to mix this with any of the peated stuff.
I've got my unpeated glass here.
Yeah.
I have an unpeated glass here. Should I rinse it or no?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's going to be a little more delicate.
This is 86 proof, so it's really like this is a tough one.
Especially following that
I should have
one.
been smarter with the Amroot.
Well, because that one in
That was
both
the hottest one we had. And now we're
being
going to the
young and
lightest.
high proof, it is the most aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is going to taste super mild. I would say spend a minute or two with this. Take a couple sips because it's going to come off very light at first. But there is a lot of complexity here. There's a reason why bottles are hyped like this because they are very good. It's a very well-made whiskey.
I think this is also very much a bourbon drinker's
For sure.
malt.
Yes. It's easy. So
Easy.
If this was a $200 bottle, we would say buy this one if you want to get into Scotch.
Okay. I'm going to say I'm still, we just poured that, but I'm still sipping on that Indian whiskey.
Yeah.
Way better with water.
Oh yeah, it improved it quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit.
I always say, and I say this with bourbon, but anything high proof, if you had a lineup of something, let's say it's 120 proof, and you did 30 iterations of that, each with a drop of water, let's say, and you were able to drink all 30 of them without over consuming, you're going to have a range of 2 or 3 that you're like, this is my zone. The chances of it being the cask strength are extremely low.
Yeah.
So, water is, I always say, take 2 or 3 sips without, and then start adding the water and figure out what you like.
It doesn't affect your man card.
No, it doesn't at all.
Yeah.
Again, it's straight out of the cask. That doesn't mean it's the best version.
Yeah.
Well, especially if it's 125 proof and
There's
you add
a
a
lot
little
of
water,
room.
you're taking it down to 110,
Right.
105.
I think bourbon guys, all the time are like, I see you roll your eyes, Tyler.
Look, being able to drink 130 proof,
Cool.
fine. But, don't say that that's the best version of
Yeah.
that whiskey.
Well, I mean, I've got to be honest. The best bourbon I've ever had is 144 proof, and it's phenomenal.
What is that?
It's one of the W.L. Wellers, the 2013 or 2014.
Okay.
That's 144. It's mind blowing.
The only thing I
Yeah.
could think of recently was going to be the Coy Hill. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I had a good Coy Hill,
Yeah.
but beyond that, it's just hot.
That's a unicorn.
Yeah. It's the first one I had. So when you're done with the Indian, drink some water. Clear that palate out.
Okay. That's just way better with water.
It is. It really improves it quite a bit. And keep in mind, that's a 6-year-old single malt. So that's the youngest thing we tasted.
So do other countries, do you find that they're not going that 12, 15, 18, 21, 24?
Well, a lot can't. I mean, you've got to be in a pretty cool climate.
Like the Cavalon that we talked about, that's a hot climate. Again, and their stuff is, I'm not the biggest fan. It's super flavorful because in the same way that when people criticize certain Texas spirits are super flavorful.
Okay, that's...
Smelling the
It's
Yamazaki.
good.
Yeah.
There's a reason why people pay a lot of money for it.
Fruity.
Yeah, it's wonderful. But right now it's not tasting like much to me. I need to take a minute or two.
Rip, did
Slice
you
of bread.
got the Yamazaki 18? Man, that is fruity.
It's very delicate and
That's
balanced.
a nice... That wasn't what I was expecting on the palate. I mean, on the nose. There's this sweetness to it that kind of... Not like stewed, but just very ripe fruit.
I think of it almost as like black tea. It reminds me of
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah.
where, I mean, it's got something there,
Okay.
but it's not super thick like stewed fruit. It's still a little
Yeah.
thinner, but with a more kind of tannic.
That's a good trigger word for me. Now that you say that, I get that.
But I mean, Yamazaki is definitely the jewel in the crown of Japanese whiskey. It's
Is it?
I
It's the
think
jewel.
so.
I didn't know if it was just the tater bottle.
no,
There's
I
other
think it's
products that are pretty good.
It's one of the best. It is.
I think it probably is the
Yeah.
best.
The best I've had. I mean, I'm not as experienced in Japanese whiskey. I've had
I'm not
quite
either.
a bit,
I will
but
admit.
it's the best I've had.
And they do some like really hot, like there's a wood in Japan called Mizunara. They do an offering that's aged in that, and it's a very unique wood for aging.
Mm-hmm.
Those are incredibly expensive,
Yeah.
but they're phenomenal.
I think Reserve 101 has a Yama 50, which is an insane
what
bottle.
is this a lower
Mortgage your
proof,
house.
isn't it?
It's 86.
86, okay.
Yeah.
Because on the palate, not a lot of viscosity. There.
Yeah, like I said, this is a tough one to drink right now. This is a first pour that you would really get all the complexity of it.
No, but if you did a glass of like that Balvenie Caribbean cask in between,
Yeah.
and then went to that, you'd say, "Oh, this is got a nice mouthfeel."
Yeah. I
It's
can see
so
that.
relative.
Okay. Yeah. It's very nice. You can tell it's well-made whiskey.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
And again, if it was $250, I'd buy it all the time,
Yeah, me too.
But
Sure.
it's
and maybe
retail-
more than that.
It's
But
like 650 or something like that.
and
yes.
I'd pay more than that. I was just using a random number, but
Yeah.
not $700, $650,
No.
whatever.
I was shocked when I found out because I was looking for a bottle and I was talking to somebody I know at Specs, and they said when they dropped that number on me, I was kind of taken aback. It's really shot up in price.
Now, this particular brand, they're well known. This is the 18 year, but they make a 12 year.
Yeah, you get this. That's about what 100 to 150. Actually, it's probably like 150 to 200.
And then they have
these
a
days.
21 year.
It's easier to find though. 20, probably. I think 21.
Yeah, 21 year I've seen.
Okay,
12 goes for 190.
Oh, it's that much now?
it's ridiculous.
Can I tell you about 7 years ago, I was buying that 12 year, and I didn't like it, but I would find it a lot for sub $100.
When I first started drinking it, it was about 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
At 189.99, I'm out.
Yeah.
Yep. But it's good. There's a reason why it's priced that way.
All right, are we done?
All right, so we're going to move on from Japanese whiskey. What are we going to next?
So this is one that our friend Rip brought. This is a lowland, the only lowland we're going to try from a distillery called Oakentoshan. They're unique in that they triple distill most of their product. Almost all Scotch is double distilled. First in what they call a wash still, and then the second one, the spirit still. This one, they triple distill it, which is more like what you would get from Irish whiskey.
And this is what is it? Sherry or Oloroso? Did I say
You know, it doesn't say. It just says noble oak, but I'm not
on the
sure.
back? On the back, it says
It is. Yep.
Sherry.
This is interesting. It says casks which once held Oloroso sherry as well as fine American bourbon hogsheads, but usually bourbon is not
Bourbon
hogshead.
hogshead?
Yeah, that's not really a thing.
No, it's not a thing. Well, I guess it could be.
It could be a thing. There's nothing in the
weird.
regs that says it has to be
Yeah.
53
And
gallons.
This is 24 years old, and
Yeah.
it's 50.3%. So this is very interesting sounding.
Okay. You guys have never had this.
No.
Not this one. But I will say for anybody listening that wants a really good entry level distillery, Oakentoshan at every price range is phenomenal.
Peated?
No.
Okay, so I need to go back
I think
to
I
my
have a
other
single
glass.
barrel from Signatory.
Yep, you will see those sometimes, but just
Young,
they're like
pretty young.
their entry level
I
bottling
think it's
is
15 years.
$40-something, I
young.
think, and it's
Yeah.
really, really good. You first, sir.
Okay, that's a nice nose. That's not the peat doesn't beat you up. Like I think a lot of people who are bourbon drinkers going to Scotch think that peat's just going to beat you up.
Well, this isn't peated, right?
No, it's not peated.
Oh, it's not peated.
No, not
okay.
peated.
Nope.
Because I thought I asked. I'm sorry.
Lowland, rarely it's going to be peated. Bladnock, I think, is maybe the exception, but generally not going to be.
This reminds me of an American single malt. It's very malty. Very toasted malt.
To me, this is a very sweet nose.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I would agree. What's the proof?
100.6.
Yeah.
It drinks, I'm not going to say hot.
This is
it's warm.
24 years old.
Yeah.
This is really different.
That's the Lowland, I think, too.
Yeah.
It's also triple distilled, so the new make's going to be a little more.
Oh, this is a lowland?
It's a Lowland,
Oh,
yeah.
perfect. So then, see, we skipped my lowland. So
Yeah.
so now we've hit.
So talk
Everything.
about how triple distilled affects the whiskey.
I mean, inherently, the more you distill something, the more you pull
Flavor out of it.
the flavor out.
Okay.
It's more refined.
It's when we get to the dirty word smooth.
Okay.
Schmoove.
Is that not a word?
Well, it just means easy to drink, which is not a bad thing
Yeah.
necessarily.
It's also
means
not a good thing
doesn't
necessarily.
Beat
Yeah.
up your palate. It doesn't burn the chest, so to speak.
Yeah.
or
I mean,
something.
the smoothest whiskey out there is
This is so
maybe
different.
Weller 12, and it's boring as hell. I'm going to trigger some more people.
Yeah, there you go. You've been triggering
See,
them all
I
But
day.
it's so smooth.
Not to get into bourbon, but I like Weller 12 more now. I used to hate it.
I agree. I do too.
Nice 90 proof 12-year-old.
Tyler's just trying to trigger people. Maybe.
This is so different.
It's really good. I like that.
I would never guess what it is.
I agree.
Rip, what did you pay for
24-year-old
this?
Scotch.
Maybe.
A lot. I mean, yeah.
And this is
the
from
more you go up in
2015
years,
too.
The more, of course, it costs. I'm gonna just throw out there probably 250 euros. I'm guessing.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
guessing.
It's solid. I like that.
Maybe 200 euros.
I agree with you using the descriptor of smooth.
Look it up. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
That's
soft.
very
It's
smooth.
yeah, it's soft. It has like almost a honey note to it. Like
I think
it's,
that's Lowland for
malty,
you.
very malty.
For 100 proof, that's just very easy on the palate.
Yeah, it drinks under that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
It's definitely warmer though than the 80 somethings.
That's really good. I will say it has a good finish though.
Oh, I agree.
It lingers for a while.
I would say it's typical of lowland, though. I mean, the profile not typical, but like it is what we said. You know, the fact that it's triple distilled. Like lowland is meant to be like a lighter Scotch, like almost a dessert Scotch.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think of it as afternoon Scotch.
Yeah.
You make me ask: is there a category of dessert Scotch that you put some things in there?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking about the like sherry bombs.
Okay.
The stuff like this Glenmorangie Milchon that's the charred oak or the charred wine casks. It's real sweet.
Okay. Are we finishing?
Big boy.
All right.
Time for the fireworks.
So for the listeners, this is an opaque matte black bottle with like shiny glossy lettering on it. It's a very interesting bottle.
Shaped like a bullet.
Yeah, it's a big tall bottle, almost like a wine bottle. So this is Octomore. This is released 12.1. It says super heavily peated. So this is Bunabin, which is the one Isla Scotch that doesn't peat. This is their one peated release, as we mentioned, and it's
So they
the
figure
highest content.
if we're gonna do peated, we're just gonna go all out.
We're gonna blow it away.
So it's the highest content of any Scotch.
Does that one
And-
say what the ppm is?
Yeah, I thought it did, but I don't see it.
could probably look it up.
But you know, here's something that I didn't know. So it's also it is. It's 130.8 ppm. And I don't know the Scotch scale as well as I know the rum scale.
So the Kilkerran was 15.
15.
Most are like 60 to 80.
Okay. Yeah. So this is
100 is
extreme.
considered high.
Yeah. 130.8.
130 is quite high.
Oh, okay.
And it's 59.9%. So
I'm
it's-
going to tell you when you guys talk about that particular number, I have no idea what you're talking about.
ppm
well,
is
just use the factor. He just said that the peat we had was like a 15, and he said a high peat.
So
is
multiply
60.
that by 10.
We're more than doubling that.
Okay,
So this is they're measuring a specific phenol that is responsible for the smoke
But parts
flavor.
per million.
So it's what are the parts per million of that phenol in the finished product? A 15 parts per million is very, very low, but it was enough that you could taste it.
Yeah.
This is now 10
but,
times
But
that.
is this something you can look for on the bottle that will help you know how peated a whiskey is?
Typically
Because-
not.
Okay.
Typically not?
It's used here because it's so high that they're just advertising. Like, look at this.
And it also
They're
depends.
proud.
Yeah. This is the most heavily peated whiskey on the planet.
It sounds weird to say this, but because ppm is not a subjective measurement, it's very objective. But depending on how long something's aged, the amount of sherry
nose.
influence, whatever else, you can kind of hide the peat a little bit.
Just the
this one
nose,
has
right?
nothing else.
This
to hide
isn't
behind.
finished, is
And look
it?
look
No.
at the color too. It's very light. It might be one of the lightest we've had. And I'm going to ask Tyler because I didn't realize. Do you know what the age is?
I was
pretty
going to
young.
ask you.
What would you guess?
I don't know the answer.
I was shocked. 5 years old.
Yeah,
Is
it
it
really
really?
young.
Yeah, this is the youngest we drank. I wouldn't guess that. I think it drinks higher than that, but it's just so peated that just takes over.
Well, I'm going to tell you on the nose, it's not off-putting.
It's isn't it? I like the nose.
I do too. I do
Got
too.
something that are like
It's real nice.
Yeah.
It's like drinking hot sauce.
Very Band-Aid. It's like a Band-Aid.
I love it. I've
I
always liked
love it
more.
too. It's
different,
phenomenal.
and that's what's cool about it.
You guys might think I'm crazy, but the 410 to me on the nose was more
It's smokier.
in your face.
This
kind
is
of-
pure peat. That's where it, like we said, it goes from smoke to medicinal Band-Aid rubber,
okay.
plastic.
I kind of like this nose.
Iodine.
It's good.
And it has a little sweetness.
So where does this?
That's good.
Is this a bottle that you just put on the shelf just to kind of go, screw with people, or is this
find that?
something that
It's
you would
meant
drink?
to be peated. I mean, it's meant to be a heavily peated product. It's for people that like peat, and it's not readily available, but it doesn't move fast. So I've seen these recently.
Expensive?
You could no, well, it's like I think maybe 230, 240. Not that bad in Scotch. Well,
Scotch
it's a
not
lot
bad
considering
at all.
it's a 5-year-old Scotch.
Yeah.
But I love it, and anytime I see a new edition, I buy it because it varies quite a bit from edition to edition. You really get like the full range of the iodine and
So
Band-Aid. And
the recent edition on Total Wine is $300.
300? Okay, I thought it was a little cheaper.
Okay, I was gonna.
And just to clarify, this is not the same distillery as the Bunhabin. This is Bruichladdich.
Oh, what am? Duh.
And you said it, I was like, yeah, right. And then I looked it up and I was like,
Because
wait,
Bruichladdich is not peated, right?
they have both peated and unpeated.
Right. This is their only peated product, I thought. Yeah,
Talk about
my
an
bad.
interesting distillery name. It's
That's the other name.
Bruichlidich.
It looks like Bruick.
And it's pronounced Bruichladdich.
It looks like Bruichladdich is what
Yeah.
it looks like, but it's Bruichladdich. Yeah, I can't believe I messed that up. But yeah, Bruichladdich.
I didn't even catch it.
Yeah.
Okay, Rip, I don't know how you feel, but to me, this isn't off-putting. This
No, I
does
enjoy
not
it.
bother me. I kind of like this.
Well, you have
makes-
transitioned
It
to the
makes
dark
me happy.
side.
If you like this, then you like any scotch.
Any
Okay, 'cause this
peated
is-
I
Scotch.
got a
Yeah.
couple in my house that taste like. I mean, when I tell you, it's.
But I know this is the most peated. I still think some of the Ardbegs, it stands out more. Even though the phenol level is
it's
lower.
smokier. It has a different
yeah.
peated quality.
And
to
that's what I've heard is avoid Ardbeg if you don't like peat.
The Wee Beastie is
yeah, that's a
Slap on
banger.
the head.
It is in a different way. Again, it's more on the.
it's like drinking liquid smoke.
Yeah, it's more smoke, whereas this is more medicinal.
Yeah.
But I love this medicinal. And the
I do
nose
too.
on this.
I do too.
Wait for the empty glass on this one.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I got to tell you, you guys were setting me up to be, I mean, damn near scared to try this with the peat. I like it. It's not beating me up. I don't know why my palate's.
This is also my favorite edition of the ones that I have.
Okay.
And I have, I think,
There are some that
Three.
are
yeah, it ranges.
Challenging.
Yes. This one has that little bit of sweetness to it.
That's what I.
that
there you
one's
go.
more
You know,
well balanced
yeah,
than some of
it's
the ones
easy
I've
to
had.
drink.
I was just gonna say that I get that sweetness on this one.
It doesn't really drink 120. I mean, it drinks a little
this is
hot.
120?
Yeah, just under 120.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it's a higher proof, but I wouldn't have thought 120.
Comparing this to the Amroot, which was 120.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, it's night and day.
Yeah, and
The
it's the same.
Amroot is
it's
way
this-
hotter.
This
Yeah.
is younger than the Amroot. So again, it
Right.
shows what's
A year
what-
younger.
It shows what happens in Scotland with aging, and also look at the color of this. It's super light. The Amroot is
Yeah.
super dark. Now that's also sherry. It's different.
But that should soften it some.
It should, yeah. But that's the heat. That's the heat in India compared to Scotland.
So of all the stuff on the table, Rob, what are your maybe 2 or 3 favorite of the day?
Well, it's going to be really hard. My 2 favorite would be the 29-year-old and the 18-year-old from Glen. What is it?
Glendronach?
Yeah, Glendronach. Those 2 with a splash of water.
Easy answer.
Those 2 were phenomenal.
I agree.
Yeah, those were phenomenal.
Glendro's my maybe lately. Glenallachie's been rising in my rankings, but Glendronach is probably my favorite brand.
You know, for thinking about just getting into Scotch and what might be a transitional one, that 10-year, the second pour we had, the 10-year.
Oh, the Tamdu. Yes.
The Tamdu.
Yeah, that was really
Phenomenal.
nice. That surprised me at how much I liked it.
That
It's
was
been so
haven't had
long.
it in a while.
really nice.
Have you had the
was really
cigar
good.
malt that they released? I was going to bring
That's
it.
cigar malt's Dalmore.
No, there's a Tamdu.
They call it.
Yeah,
They call it that.
yeah. They released I think the first one.
Interesting.
2 years ago. I'll have to get you a sample of it.
Okay.
It's phenomenal. It's a heavy, high proof
I did not know they
sherry
came out
bomb.
with one.
Yeah.
If I were going to tell you my biggest, from looking at a label and biggest maybe expectation to disappointment, might have been that Madeira.
I agree.
I thought there was going to be a little bit more oomph
Yeah,
on that. and it-
those airport releases tend to be a softer, easier pour.
Yeah.
I think though that if I recall correctly, we came from a higher proof and went to that, so it
We
came
did.
off as
That's
very
true.
soft.
Yeah.
If you just tried that on its own, just like the Yama 18, if you poured those first, I think you'll get more complexity out of it. But having said that,
If we had done these in a different order, we could have essentially influenced what your answer is.
yeah.
and no doubt about it. I think it's a very
I
fair
agree
point.
with your point though, because
Yeah.
that Madeira, there's no way it holds up to the other bottles.
No.
No.
Like no
No.
way. It's
No.
nice. It's
If
easy.
that was the second thing we tried, I think we would say it's phenomenal.
It's meant for people in the airport.
Okay, fair enough.
You know, so it's nice.
But there is not as much Madeira influence as I was hoping.
Yeah,
That's my point. I
wouldn't
thought I
guess
was going to
Madeira.
get this richness,
I wouldn't
this
guess Madeira
depth
either.
to it that I just
Well,
I
don't
liked
get.
it though. I
expecting-
actually liked it, but
I was expecting heavy stewed fruits, oxidized.
Yeah, I didn't dislike it. I guess I was expecting more.
I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's just not what I expected.
Exactly. I would say that's fair to say. And I think that's a great point because, how many times have we lined up, 4 really good whiskeys, whether it's bourbon or whatever, and what is this?
I know you just had the Octomore, so it's kind of probably shot. But
Peated
try
or
that.
not? Okay, let me put it in this one.
So this is far North Highlands, but it's one of the big ones, Glenmorangie. You'll see this distillery a lot. Their 10-year, the yellow label is a great starting point for people.
I've got some. I mean, my brother
great.
got that bottle. I got another bottle that's really.
And they're much more affordable than most.
Oh, that's not. This isn't peated at all.
Nope, not at all. But Glenmorangie as a distillery, despite being huge and a lot of marketing, very, very affordable.
That's a low proof.
Yeah, it's 46.
Yeah, that is just so nice on the nose. That is really.
I love this one.
Let me try a little bit.
Oh, that's good. That's nice.
Glenmorangie puts out some. There's one that they make called Campanta. That's one of my favorites.
Try that.
Signet is. If you talk about what's the best bottle of Scotch under $200, Signet's
Yeah, that's
probably
the other one.
answer.
That's the other one. But it's the thing about the Glenmorangie Signet. It's a beautiful bottle. It's one that I recommend for as a gift bottle.
It's
people
gorgeous
say because
bottle.
it's a beautiful. It has this nice big heavy topper, but it's like a bitter dark chocolate.
It's a chocolate bomb.
coffee bomb.
Oh, really?
And it's truly you're going to get chocolate and coffee 100%.
Okay, I'm interested in that.
So
because
it's
coffee
a
and chocolate-
beautiful bottle. They have a really pretty label. Actually,
It's
this
all
one doesn't
gold.
have it, but
The bottle looks like dark brown with
It's
a
great.
gold label, and it's interesting though. But it's so different than everything we tasted. It's almost like a specialty Scotch,
But
'cause it's so coffee and chocolate.
it's wildly underpriced in my opinion.
yeah, for 200 it's,
For what it is.
and it's as a gift bottle. It's beautiful,
Can you buy that here?
easily found.
I will absolutely say
We didn't
try the Oban at all, did we?
Oh yeah,
We
I
did not.
wanted you to try the Oban because I brought that because I know we were talking to people who were looking to get into Scotch. I think that this is a phenomenal bottle to get into Scotch. So this is the Oban 10, and so it just says Oban 10, but I think this is a special edition. So this one has a purple rabbit on it. So if you're looking for the bottle, it has a purple rabbit. I think that it changes every year. I could be wrong on this, but this is this is 57 proof, so it is a little bit higher.
It's not finished, is it?
I think it is. It's sherry. Okay, so it says secondary maturation in ex sherry and Amontillado seasoned casks. So what is that wine?
That's a very light sherry.
Okay, so two different
One of
types
the
of sherry.
lightest.
So yeah, this is killer, and this bottle is maybe $90.
Okay.
And I first had it at the bar. So again, going back to try stuff at the bar, and I had it, and I thought it was great for a sub $100 bottle.
Their just regular offering is a hidden gem.
Really?
Yeah. Not one that anybody talks about.
I can't get over the nose on this. What is this?
This one?
Leman
No, it's great.
Oh, I need to have this.
Glenmorangie.
Glenmorangie.
So what's this bottle?
So it is. They do these private editions.
Milchon?
Milchon. They do different ones every year. Campanta was part of this.
Retoasted wine.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's retoasted wine casks. They don't really say what kind of wine.
Former wine retoasted for the purpose. Started in bourbon.
Man,
46.
that's not readily available.
No, this
Because
one's from several years
I've never
ago.
seen
You
it.
talk about a transition from bourbon to this. To me, the sweetness on this.
I agree.
Yeah.
I love
Big
this one.
time. This is good.
And this one, I think, when it was out, was sub 100.
Wow.
Glenmorangie is phenomenal value across everything they make.
It is, yeah.
I mean, the point of today's episode was to introduce people to, Scotch 101, just to kind of explore and find. You guys talked about it early on that, bourbon is this kind of single lane, one way kind of spirit. And Scotch is this all over the place. I mean, you can go 100 different directions.
And the wild thing about everything we've tried today, it's water, yeast, and barley.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's it.
So I'm going to ask the question because you make me with that statement. How does it become so different? What makes it? Because everything that we've had today has been, I mean, you've taken me on this journey that is just an exploration of
peated
whiskeys
versus
that is
non-peated.
awesome.
It's sherry or
region,
other
you know,
casks. It's
the barley they use, the sherry that they or the finishing that
and
they
it's even the
use.
stills. There are you can taste the difference between Glendronach and the Tamdu, even though they are made in very similar
Well,
styles.
tell the story real quick about the guy who had all the dents.
Oh
in
yeah,
it.
so we went to a distillery that was like 2 years old at the time, called Ballindollach. It's in the very kind of bottom end of Speyside, and they had brought a guy out of retirement to come open the distillery, and it is tiny distillery. They have 2 stills that work in pairs, so it's the low wine still and the spirit still. There are like 100,000 liters a year. Compare that to Glenfiddich, that's like 21 million liters a year. So tiny distillery. And they order these brand new stills, gorgeous copper pot stills from I think they were Vendome made. And we looked at them, and on the gooseneck, so pot still, big round base, and then you've got this kind of long skinny piece called the gooseneck that goes up. All these dents in the gooseneck, and somebody of our tour group said, just kind of half joking, "Did you guys have some trouble moving those in?" He goes, "Oh no, the master distiller, we were doing test runs. He didn't like the new make that was coming out, so he was climbing up on the still with a sledgehammer and beating the gooseneck to change the shape of it to get the flavor he wanted." So that's how much the still can change the product. The shape, the size.
Well, like, have you ever
the
seen
flow.
Balcones pot still? Like, it has all the coils, and,
Yep.
and they have it running across the ceiling, like, because the distance that it has to travel makes a difference as well.
Because what happens is when you've got a dent, when it tries to go up, it'll condensate and it'll come back down, and then it'll distill again. So it's all part of the way the still works.
But how impressive, and to his credit, to know where to beat the hell out of that to get what he was looking for.
Somebody
what he
that's done
wanted.
it for a long time.
Yeah. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So I'm interested to try that one. That was in 2015. They filled their first casks in 2014, and they said they wouldn't even try them until 2024. So they're going to try them this year.
Who is this?
It's called Ballindollach. Okay. And they are the only estate. They're creating a new thing, estate single malt. The barley is grown on site. It's malted on site, distilled, aged, bottled within the estate that they own.
Wow.
It's the McPherson Grant family that owns half of Speyside. And they have beautiful castle there, but they grow all their own stuff there, do it all right there on the property. After we're done with the podcast, I'll show you some pictures. It's a gorgeous place.
Interesting. Well, I really like this Glenmorangie.
It's great.
Yeah.
Man, that is really good.
I think Glenmorangie is overlooked because of the price point. I think they could charge more and probably place themselves as a more premium product if this bottle was $160 instead of $100.
Yeah.
What did you pay for that?
It was under $100.
Wow. Yeah, it's a steal.
So when I first tasted it, I thought it reminded me of what I was going to taste on this, and then I had the Oban 10, and this has a funk to it that I didn't remember.
Yeah.
That does not.
Oban has a bit of a funk.
Yeah, it is. It's I don't know how else to describe it. That funky.
I mean, I the Glenmorangie, I keep going back to when I think about a bourbon drinker trying to get into Scotch, this is it. I mean, this has that sweetness that...
It always has a lot of citrus to me, like orange peel.
That tastes to me like a white wine finish. Like it has that like fruitier, light character.
They don't say what it is. But they do one that is... I forget if it's... I think they call it the Côte d'Or finish, and it's white wine barrels, and that one's really good.
Yeah, that's really good.
So you tasted a lot of diversity, and the funny thing is, this is just scratching the surface. Like we really could do a whole other set of bottles that you've not tasted.
Yeah, we're 2 hours, 20 minutes in, and this is just scratching the surface.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Scotch is so diverse.
Okay, well, that's a lot of Scotch. You guys ready to go to some fried chicken and champagne?
I think I need it now after all these I don't know how many pours we had.
Yeah. So, well, that's been a fun episode. I've learned a lot. I hope the listeners have learned a lot. Definitely been a fun exploration. No doubt that if you haven't explored the world of Scotch, you definitely need to. If you did it a few years ago and you're like, I need to, you definitely need to. This Scotch is, I'm blown away with the diversity of flavors that I got today and how much of it I enjoyed. And, you mentioned, what is this one called?
Octomore?
I thought it was going to really just make me go, yeah, not my thing. I absolutely like that.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it.
It has a nice sweetness to it that
Yeah.
just makes it much easier to drink, despite the fact that it has some, divisive flavor notes.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain where my palate might be to people who would go, that's divisive. I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed that.
It's good.
Yeah, we all like it.
So, Rip, thank you for sharing a little 24-year-old Scotch with it on the table today.
Coming in clutch.
Yeah. Something these two Scotch guys have never had. I don't know how often that happens.
Well, it's funny because we had talked about that one earlier in the episode.
That
Brand.
producer.
The brand, yeah.
That distillery, yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thanks for having
And,
me.
Anytime.
Who knows? In the future, we might drill down a little bit and get a little bit more deep. I don't know where we go with Scotch, but
Scotch 201.
Scotch 201. We'll do that for sure. But been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this, and I'm ready to go have some fried chicken and some food and a little bit of champagne.
To the chicken.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. And until your next episode, enjoy your next pour. Thank you, Bear.
What perfect timing.
The blend is good.